Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao mean the revolution, and Trump humiliates Europe again, humiliates them to their face. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Let's get right into the content.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, so from Financial Times, can you see any situation where US forces could be deployed as a backstop in a peacekeeping operation in direct confrontation with Russian forces?
Well, there is a backstop thing. You know, first you're going to have European countries because they're right there. We're very far away. We have an ocean between us. But we want to make sure it works. So I don't know when you say backstop, you mean a backstop psychologically or militarily or what? But we are a backstop because we'll be over there. We'll be working in the country. We're going to be, that's a great thing economically for them because, you know, when you talk about economic development, we're going to have a lot of people over there. So we'll be working in the country. So I just don't think you're going to have a problem. I think when we have an agreement, you can say whatever you want about security, who's going to do it or all, and that's going to be a very pleasant conversation. The hard conversation is, will we have an agreement? And I think the answer is yes. I think Russia will agree. And I think that I really believe Ukraine will agree also.
So will you discuss AUKUS as well?
Just to follow up on that, if British troops are in Ukraine keeping the peace and get attacked by Russia, will you come to their aid?
If the British people are in Ukraine and they get attacked,
If British soldiers in Ukraine.
you know, I've always found about the British, they don't need much help. They can take care of themselves very well. You know what? No, it sounds like it's evasive, but it's not evasive. You know, the British have been incredible soldiers, incredible military.
They asked Trump, if the British are in Ukraine and they get attacked by Russia, will you help them? What are they a country? Can they help themselves? But they want Trump. See, they want Britain to be attacked, so they want America to fight Russia. But you're Trump say, they can, Britain, they're good. They're a nice country. They know how to fight. You know, one thing about them, they always been able to take care of themselves. But the humiliation
And they can
is finna come. Just watch.
take care of themselves. But if they need help, I'll always be with the British. Okay, I'll always be with them. But they don't need help. You look at their career. You have done very well over the years, haven't you?
We have. I'm very proud of our country, and we've also always been there backing each other up. Between
now you see what he did. Trump said, you've been doing pretty good lately, haven't you? Like, you gonna fight Russia by yourself? And look at this clown. Yeah. But you know, we always back each other up. Britain want America to fight Russia. Trump not going for that. Trump really finna humiliate this clown to his face. Nick, watch.
between our two countries. That is why this is the greatest alliance for prosperity and security I think the world has ever seen. Whenever necessary, we've absolutely backed each other up, and that's at the
Could you take on Russia by yourselves?
Well,
you clown. All that, Trump like all that talk. Can you fight Russia by yourself? Well, why are you talking tough? That's what Trump just exposed him on. Why are you talking tough? You can't fight Russia by yourself. I say it's gonna be peace. He had to laugh it off. Now that man supposed to say, absolutely, we could defend our country if we have to fight. He can't even say it. He can't even let the lie come out his mouth. Because then he know Trump gonna say, good, we'll do it. Why are you here? But that was very humiliating. Because they know what Trump is saying. You might have to fight Russia on your own. But they should have been paying attention to what he said the day before, on this day. And he told him there ain't gonna be
Donald
no NATO
Trump
in this.
made it clear Ukraine is no longer America's burden. Speaking before his first cabinet meeting on Wednesday, the US president signaled a dramatic shift, declaring that NATO membership was off the table and that Washington would no longer bankroll Kyiv's war effort.
What concessions would you like to see?
Oh, I don't want to tell you right now, but I can tell you that NATO you can forget about. I think that's probably the reason the whole thing started.
The message could not have been sharper. Ukraine will have to fight its own battles, and Europe must step up financially. Trump, long critical of US aid to Kyiv, insisted any peace deal would require Russian concessions, but emphasized that Ukraine should lose as little territory as possible.
But if
Mr.
Mr.
President,
Putin gets to
just to
keep
bring
the land that was claimed by force, if the Russians get to keep the territory that they claimed by force, doesn't that send a dangerous message, let's say, to China?
Oh, okay. You try and take it away, right? We're gonna do the best we can.
Come on. Trump not playing. Marco Rubio and them laughing. Our Secretary of Defense, he laughing. Trump just told a reporter, you take it from him. Why are you trying to play tough? Why do we always have all these reporters on TV talking tough? So Trump just told a reporter, you try taking that territory from Russia. You want all of us to die? We're trying to get peace here. Forget about the territory Russia got. If we don't get this peace negotiation, they're going to take everything. I'm glad Trump told that punk that. You reporter, quit acting like you fighting a war.
We're gonna do the best we can to make the best deal we can for both sides, but for Ukraine, we're gonna try very hard to make a good deal so that they can get as much back as possible.
But Trump's vision for Ukraine's future comes at a cost, one Kyiv must now shoulder. The US president confirmed that Zelensky was expected in Washington to finalize a framework agreement granting the US a stake in Ukraine's vast mineral wealth. However, security guarantees were off the table.
Mr. President, Ukraine, can you talk a little bit about what type of security guarantees you're willing to make?
Well, I'm not going to make security guarantees beyond very much. We're going to have Europe do that because it's in, we're talking about Europe as their next door neighbor. But we're going to make sure everything goes well. And as you know, we'll be really partnering with Ukraine in terms of rare earth. We very much need rare earth. They have great rare earth. We'll be working with Secretary Burgum and with Chris. You'll be working on that together. And we're going to be able to have tremendous, this gives us, because we don't have that much of it here. We have some, but we don't have that much. We need a lot more to really propel us to the next level to lead in every way.
For Zelensky, who has fought relentlessly for long-term US military backing, Trump's stance was a harsh reality check. The Ukrainian president acknowledged negotiations were underway, but firmly rejected claims that Kyiv owed Washington anything.
The main thing for me was that we were not in debt. Despite what the media reports say, the agreement does not include 500 billion in debt, not 350, not 100 billion, because it would have been unfair. I mean, in relation to us. Because, as I said earlier, there were no such agreements before, and therefore there is nothing to talk about in terms of this topic. So far, no one is reimbursing anything. This issue is important until the agreement is ratified, as well as an agreement that will follow. But this is all about the future, and debt is about the past.
While the rhetoric remains...
That's just all to make himself feel good and to have the Ukrainians think he didn't just give away the rest of the little resources they had, but he did. He's paying what he owed to Trump. Anything in the future, any future revenue, we're going to see about making that. But first, they got to pay what they owe, and he's signing that. Come on, Zelensky is a clown.
Remains tense. Negotiations between Washington and Kyiv continue. The rare minerals agreement is still in its framework stage, with Zelensky stressing that Ukraine retains ownership of its resources. He hinted that the deal could eventually be linked to broader security guarantees, but for now it remains a financial arrangement rather than a military commitment.
And if we are talking about the fund, this is also a done deal in this framework agreement. I think that there are co-owners, which means partners. This is important because, as I said, these are our resources. We are grateful to the...
They should hang him high right now, bro. They niggas say we co-owners. Call it what you want, bro. The U.S. got 50% of your shit now because of you little weasel. See how I'm trying to make himself? No, we're co-owners. We don't want to own it. We just want you to pay us, and we're gonna be taking the resources that we want out your country. Y'all can watch it for us. We don't want to stay there. Make sure nobody steal nothing. This dude is nuts, bro. They gonna deal with the Ukrainians gonna get their hands on this dude. He just say their resources is co-owned by the U.S., but he don't own nothing. Boy, this dude is on drugs. He on drugs right now.
The United States of America, and we are ready to talk about partnership. And it is important that it has partners in it. And the fund is Ukrainian-American, not American. This agreement may be part of future security guarantees, but a deal is a deal. But we need to understand a broader vision of what awaits Ukraine, where we are, and so on. So, here I am calm because I was told that there is no 2-to-1 ratio at this point. That is to say, it is correct to say that for every US dollar we have to pay 2.
Meanwhile, a larger diplomatic chess game is unfolding. US and Russian officials held talks last week in Riyadh, and another meeting is scheduled for February 27th in Istanbul to discuss bilateral relations and possible steps toward resolving the war. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov confirmed the upcoming discussions, underscoring ongoing diplomatic maneuvers between Moscow and Washington.
We announced that our diplomats, top-ranking diplomats and experts, are going to meet and take a look at the systemic problems that accumulated as a result of the previous administration's illegitimate activities. And of course, we responded to that in kind, creating uncomfortable conditions for the functioning of America's embassy in Moscow. I think the meeting is taking place tomorrow in Istanbul, and after that meeting, we will realize how quickly and efficiently we're going to move forward.
Zelensky is set to visit Washington on Friday, possibly to finalize the minerals deal, an arrangement Trump has framed as America's overdue repayment. But as Ukraine fights for its survival, one thing is certain. The US is no longer handing out blank checks, and Kiev's future now hinges on a different kind of transaction.
The dialogue between Russia and the United States has been resumed, the Kremlin officially announced today. Details of a possible face-to-face future meeting between the presidents are not disclosed. However, tomorrow there will be a continuation of the dialogue, a meeting in Istanbul on the issue of diplomatic missions of Russia and the United States. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia will not allow any peacekeepers into Ukraine. There will be no deal or ceasefire along the front line either. What remains of Ukraine must be cleared of racist laws. But Europe will not be allowed into the negotiations either, because Brussels is sabotaging peace. Trump said at night that the United States is ready to cooperate with Russia in the development of natural resources. Head of the Direct Investment Fund Dmitriev confirmed that Russia and the United States are interested in finding joint projects. Washington immediately heard these words. Fox News sources confirm that U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent may come to Moscow in March or April for talks on the world's hottest topic of rare earth metals, and the Americans have officially put the squeeze on Kiev. Ukraine may sign an agreement with the United States on its natural resources as early as Friday. The document does not provide any security guarantees. The ceremony is to be held in Washington. Trump said he would not mind if Zelensky came. It would be hard to say it more mockingly. Look,
Is it true that President Zelensky is going to meet with you on Friday? And has the mineral deal been settled? Yes, I heard about it. I heard that he will come on Friday. Of course, I am not against it if he wants. He would like to sign the agreement with me.
this is the most expensive ticket in history to visit the White House. Zelensky is giving up his country's resources in exchange for a meeting with Donald Trump. According to the Financial Times, Washington has put pressure on Ukraine to transfer half of its income from future development of natural resources, rare earth metals, oil and gas to a special fund. I think the president knows how to make a deal better than anyone before him. To make a deal, you need to get both sides to the negotiating table. And usually, when you make a good deal, everyone gets up from the table a little unhappy. So far, only Zelensky looks unhappy. Reuters writes that the security guarantees that Kiev demanded in exchange for resources did not appear in the text of the agreement. The Ukrainian cabinet of ministers is asking to sign the document in any version in order to try to make peace with the Trump administration. Zelensky has already said that he will sign it. He himself did not mention security guarantees anymore either. Why are there no direct security guarantees in this agreement?
The main thing for me was that we are not debtors. And despite what is being said in the media, the agreement does not contain any information about the 500 billion debt, or the 350, or the 100 billion, because it would be unfair, I think, to us.
Trump himself announced the new amount of this agreement. It's not $500 million anymore. It's $1 trillion.
I understand that this is a big deal, a very big.
That's crazy, crazy. It's like a nigga telling you, I seen this shit before. You owe more now. Yeah, you did owe that. Now you owe more. That's what Trump just told him. I told you owe 350 billion, half of 500 billion, and you didn't like my number. Now y'all owe the US $1 trillion.
Big deal. I think the American people, judging by the polls, are very happy because Biden was throwing money around like candy at a fair. This is a really big deal. Maybe $1 trillion, maybe even more. But we're talking about rare earth metals and other things. And look, we're spending.
Bro, y'all don't make no deal. I'll walk away. It won't even be no Ukraine. Britain can't do shit. Germany, France, nobody can stop the Russians. If Trump and the US walk away, Putin gonna just continue the war. However long it take to take the whole Ukraine. If it take 3-4 more years, then that's just what it'll be. So that's why he's telling them, you're gonna keep running this ticket up until you sign the paper, and the ticket gonna be higher for every day. Every time you run your mouth, and some people be like, "Nah, that ain't true." Trump telling them that. You see, he told them it's $1 trillion now.
Hundreds of billions of dollars on a war between Ukraine and Russia. A war that should never have happened. But Biden came in and got involved, wasting money like no one has ever done before. $350 billion is another thing that we're not happy with. Europe spent $100 billion. We spent $350 billion. The difference is that Europe will pay it back because they gave it as a loan and we just gave it away. It's 300 or 350 billion. No one even knows for sure. They can't even tell me the exact amount, which means that it's probably an even bigger figure. So now we're saying, look, we want guarantees. We want this money back.
In the preliminary text of the deal, which is being published by Ukrainian propaganda, Washington promises to try to identify specific steps to protect its future property in Ukraine in exchange for resources.
The United States government supports Ukraine's efforts to obtain the security guarantees necessary to create a lasting peace. The participants will try to identify any necessary steps to protect mutual investments.
According to U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, during a meeting in Munich, he delicately, but at the same time firmly explained to President Zelensky that the war would have to end. Zelensky pretended not to understand. And now the conversation will be tougher. Trump said that arms supplies to Ukraine have been stopped.
Without the United States, without our money and military equipment, this war would have ended in a very short time. The war could go on for some time, maybe until we make a deal with Russia. Look, we need to make a deal with Russia. Otherwise, this conflict will continue. The war could either drag on or end pretty quickly. I think it will end quickly. At the moment, we are not supplying Ukraine with anything at all.
The U.S. Secretary of State had to comment on Kiev's nuclear fantasies. Marco Rubio said that Zelensky's words about a nuclear bomb as an alternative to membership in the alliance cannot be taken seriously.
See, he's a psychopath, gonna get everybody killed.
I don't think anyone takes this as a serious offer from them. And I also don't think that arming Ukraine with nuclear weapons is the solution. If he really says that, I don't think it's a realistic demand. We need fewer nuclear states, not more. Will they give us nuclear weapons? Give us back our nuclear weapons. Give us the missile systems we need.
Never had no nuclear weapons unless that belongs.
Dear partners, finance our million-strong army. Introduce your military contingent to those parts of our country where we want to stabilize the situation so that people have clarity at the level of common sense. If the country with which we are essentially now engaged in military operations becomes a nuclear power, then what should we do? In this case, we will use all. I want to emphasize this. All the means of destruction at Russia's disposal.
Negotiations between the United States and Russia are reaching a new level. According to Marco Rubio, Washington and Moscow have already begun discussing stopping the war. The next step is to understand on what terms Moscow is ready to make a deal.
If we can end this conflict, what will the relationship between the United States and Russia look like in the 21st century? Are there areas where we can cooperate in geopolitics or perhaps even in economics? The president has already spoken about this. There are opportunities for joint work. And, of course, in this discussion we will have to address not only the issue of Russian assets frozen in the United States, Europe, or elsewhere, but also the situation with American companies that have suffered. This should be part of a broader discussion about resetting our relations.
The White House has abandoned the policy of regime change and has taken a course on flexible diplomacy. As former State Department advisor Kimmich writes in Foreign Affairs, Washington will not try to influence the domestic policies of Moscow and Beijing. British Prime Minister Starmer will discuss Russia's return to the G7 with the U.S. president. The Kremlin has already called this format irrelevant, as well as the idea of introducing peacekeepers to Ukraine.
Some form of peacekeeping mission will be necessary, so a solution that suits everyone must be found. We are also interested in a peacekeeping initiative. In fact, I did raise this issue, but it is important that the format is acceptable to all parties. Ultimately, I am confident that we will be able to reach an agreement.
The Financial Times reports that Trump has already rejected Macron's idea of sending French soldiers to Ukraine. If the West sends 30,000 peacekeepers to Ukraine, they will be the first to flee in the event of a new offensive by Putin, said Kostenko, secretary of the Defense Committee of the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada. Former U.S. National Security Advisor, Director of Color Revolutions Bolton believes that Putin has defeated everyone and NATO is falling apart. And a new slap in the face from the White House. Reuters sources in Washington doubted the prospect of an early meeting between Zelensky and Trump due to Zelensky's unwillingness to make a deal. So, Europe, according to the British Economist, has decided on its leader, who will be, and most importantly, who will be able to resist both Trump and Putin. It will be Macron. There was no one else comparable in the scale of his personality, courage, charisma, and bravery, as the British magazine writes, in the European Union. This publication does not hide the fact that they chose the leader based on the principle of the best of the worst. As Vladimir Vysotsky sang, there are few truly wild ones. Emmanuel's warlike image is supported by his finance minister Eric Lombard. He said that both Germany and Britain are ready to send troops to Ukraine on Macron's orders. Poland has so far refused this suicidal idea. Look, Prime Minister Tusk, in order to avoid going to war with Russia, suddenly injured his leg, but he told everyone that he fell down a hill while skiing. Footage of Tusk on your screens, with a splint and a cast on his leg. According to the latest report from the French Court of Auditors, sending one NATO soldier to Ukraine would cost almost 100,000 euros a year. Europe does not have that kind of money. U.S. Secretary of State Rubio, who canceled a meeting with the head of European diplomacy Kaja Kallas, who has already arrived in Washington, said that the United States will no longer subsidize NATO allies. British Prime Minister Starmer is literally hysterical. Just now, speaking in Parliament, he promised that tomorrow he would personally sternly forbid Trump from negotiating with Russia, with Putin, without Ukraine.
I ain't do none of that shit.
A missile of Russian army. Its explosion epically destroyed a camouflaged drone control center for the armed forces of Ukraine, camouflaged near Shostka in Sumy region, on February 26, 2025. Russian sources released footage today on February 27, showing how Russian reconnaissance aircraft tracked the activities of Ukrainian formations, the movement of convoys carrying enemy long-range kamikaze drone operators, and followed them to a secret pre-launch point, not far from the city of Shostka. Ukrainian forces were preparing to launch more than a dozen drones, which were supposed to be launched into Russia last night, and possibly to attack Kursk region or possibly to attack a power plant, sources reported. When they arrived, Iskander-M missiles were already assigned to them. As soon as they dropped off the drones, a missile were sent to their positions. Once again, Iskander-M ballistic missile, which are accurate and have lightning-fast strike capabilities, hit the drone launch site with pinpoint accuracy, happening right above the Kiev formation, wiping them out instantly with no chance of survival. The Iskander air explosion caused great damage, where objective control confirmed the destruction of several Ukrainian vehicles with special equipment. The preliminary results of the strike destroyed about 14 units of long-range kamikaze UAV of Cobra type. 4 vehicles were destroyed. At least 25 UAV specialists were eliminated at the work site. This was also reported by Russian Defense Ministry, as Kiev's heavy losses accumulated by Iskander strikes on Sumy over the past few months.
Against the backdrop of the Russian army's successful advance in all key directions of the front, the Russian aerospace forces and missile forces continue to launch massive and combined missile strikes against enemy military targets in the southern, central, northern, and western parts of Ukraine. Thanks to the professional and coordinated actions of Russian military intelligence, the Ukrainian army and NATO forces continue to suffer heavy losses, even being located in the western part of Ukraine, several hundred kilometers from the combat contact line. By the way, today was no exception either. So, on the night of February 26, the Russian missile forces, together with the aerospace forces, launched another massive missile attack on the territory of Ukraine. This time, military installations in such Ukrainian regions as Poltava, Sumy, Kharkiv, Kiev, and Lviv were hit by Russian ballistic and cruise missiles. According to preliminary data, Russia used 50 Kh-101 cruise missiles and about 20 Iskander-M ballistic missiles during this attack. Moreover, it is reported that this missile attack was accompanied by a massive raid by 180 Russian kamikaze drones. The main task of these Russian kamikaze drones was to identify and overload Ukrainian and Western air defense systems. And judging by the incoming information, these kamikaze drones have successfully completed the objective sought. So, in the Poltava region, Russian missiles rained down on energy infrastructure facilities and military airfields. In particular, independent monitoring services recorded about 8 powerful explosions in cities such as Mirgorod and Kremenchuk. In the Sumy region, independent monitoring services recorded 5 powerful explosions in the southwestern part of the settlement of Unikovka. As it turned out, in this settlement, Russian missiles hit and destroyed a classified place for the temporary deployment of personnel of the Ukrainian army and foreign mercenaries. Later, representatives of the Russian Defense Ministry confirmed the destruction of 30 Ukrainian soldiers and 12 foreign mercenaries. It is reported that these were mostly Georgian, Polish, and French citizens. In the Kharkiv region, in the northwestern part of the city of Kharkiv, Russian missiles hit the Ukrainian army's command post. It is noteworthy that this command post was located in the basement of a local dormitory. In the Kiev region, in the southern and eastern parts of the city of Kiev, Russian missiles hit and destroyed warehouses and local arms manufacturers that were actively working for the needs of the Ukrainian army. And finally, in the Lviv region, 2 Russian Iskander-M ballistic missiles hit a military train, right at the train station in the central part of the city of Lviv. Later, residents of Lviv began to post numerous videos, where you can see clouds of smoke over the Lviv railway station. At the same time, they confirmed that powerful explosions are still being heard on the territory of the railway station. A few hours after the missile attack, representatives of the Russian underground in Ukraine announced that Russian ballistic missiles had struck a NATO military train arriving from Poland. According to them, there was quite a valuable military cargo on board this train. As it turned out, these were dozens of AIM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. These missiles were intended for F-16 fighter jets, which were transferred to Ukraine in the summer and autumn of 2024. It is noteworthy that Russia attacked this NATO train with valuable military cargo at the very moment when Polish presidential candidate Sławomir Mencen was in Lviv. This Polish politician is known for openly stating that one of Warsaw's primary objectives is to rejoin the city of Lviv with the Polish state. This Polish politician defiantly calls Lviv, Lemberg, and promises to return this city to Poland as soon as he becomes president. Sławomir Mencen is also known for his criticism of the Ukrainian authorities. According to him, the Ukrainian authorities approve and propagandize the Nazi ideology, which is a real felony. As an example, he showed the monument to Stepan Bandera in the center of Lviv. This Polish politician recalled that the Ukrainian authorities continue to erect monuments to such ardent Nazis as Stepan Bandera, on whose orders more than 100,000 Polish civilians were killed in the 1940s of the last century. Against this backdrop, Lviv Mayor Andrei Sadovy banned this Polish politician from entering the city of Lviv. In response, Slavomir Mensin stated that the Ukrainian Nazis had no right to forbid him from visiting Lviv, since this city belongs to Poland. According to him, Lviv's return to its native harbor will become a reality as soon as he becomes president of Poland. Meanwhile, Donald Trump and his administration continue to humiliate and abuse European leaders amid their support for the Kiev regime. In particular, the European media is still in a state of shock from Donald Trump's disrespectful attitude towards French President Emmanuel Macron and Polish leader Andrzej Duda. Indeed, the fact that Donald Trump did not meet the French president at the entrance of the White House and forced him to sit at the edge of the table like an ordinary subordinate indicates that Trump does not respect European leaders and views them as mere vassals. Polish President Andrzej Duda has also come to believe from his own experience that European leaders are essentially vassals of Donald Trump. In particular, the Polish leader was humiliated by the fact that he had to wait in the hallway for almost half an hour to get to an appointment with the current owner of the White House. On February 27, the head of the European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, was also humiliated by the U.S. authorities. It is reported that for 20 hours she tried to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington. However, Marco Rubio refused to meet with her, citing problems with the work schedule. Thus, the U.S. authorities have once again demonstrated to the world that Europe is not an ally of the United States, but an ordinary vassal, who will follow the White House's orders no matter what. By the way, the political clown Volodymyr Zelensky is also going to visit the United States on Friday. It looks like we will soon witness another humiliation of Europe and the Kiev authorities. So, make yourself comfortable, and be ready for an explosive show.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is we've been interviewing a lot of the international representatives here.
My right-wing brethren.
Yes, exactly. But the Law and Justice Party in Poland, from which the former prime minister is here, Morawiecki, and the woman who was actually on stage with you last night from the AFD, Christine Anderson. AFD, yeah. They have some serious ideological problems with one another about Polish allegations that the AFD has like a revisionist attitude toward World War II. Yeah. No, but I'm saying what do you make of that fissure, and how do you bridge it? Can it be bridged?
I don't know. Look, populist nationalism. We believe in the Westphalian system. We believe in every nation is going to have their MAGA move. It's going to be different. It's going to have its own characteristics, its own house style. I think it's great that they have disagreements and they'll try to figure it out. I'm not in there to say, oh no, you're right and you're wrong. I got my own theories about World War II or my study of World War II. I'm a huge supporter of AFD. I'm a huge supporter of the Polish movement, and they'll figure it out. And I realize in that part of the world, this kind of been the cockpit of the 20th century as far as wars go. They have big disagreements, but you're going to see this all over. I mean, I was Georgia Maloney's biggest backer when she was at 3%. We raised her up. There's a documentary made about me. I made sure she was in. I'm a supporter. She's been a big disappointment in the Ukraine war. We have been right about the Ukraine war from the beginning. And I warned the people around it, and I would go on TV and I do interviews in Italy, say, we love you, but you got this one really wrong and you're acting too much like a globalist. And she's very close to Trump, and Trump comes in the last 72 hours and really supports what we've been saying for years about this Ukraine situation. And I think actually you're going to find out much more about Ukraine that's going to get people sick to their stomach. So those kind of things are happening. They're going to happen. Remember, it's a international and global movement of kind of populist nationalism, but it's going to be different all over.
They have very different attitudes towards Russia, too, as you alluded to. PIS, very hostile toward Russia. They invoke the Soviet legacy. AFD wants more of a reconciliation with Russia, maybe more in line with your preferences. It's a broad tent, but in terms of solving an acute geopolitical issue right now, that's not just something to kind of argue about in theoretical terms. That's a pretty pressing, tangible issue. Yeah, I was just saying. So their differences on their attitude toward Russia right now, that's not just some theoretical thing to hash out. That could have implications acutely for the resolution of a ongoing geopolitical issue.
Yes, it could. But I think it's got to be worked out. Those people have two different attitudes. The Poles have a very different attitude towards the Russians than at least part of the Germans do, right? It's one of the things that has to be worked out. But people ought to understand something. The Russian people have been our allies in the Great War on the Eurasian landmass in the middle of the 20th century. The Chinese people, Lao Beijing, and the Russian people, not their leaders, they were our allies. And the Indian people down in Burma and in Irrawaddy, the Russians lost, I think, 60 million people to the war. The Chinese lost 35 million. If the Russians hadn't taken so many casualties, the Russian army, the Red Army at the time, we would have lost 2 or 3 million men in Europe, and we didn't. Why? Because they took the brunt of it. So those people, now we have fucked them over because we gave Stalin too many arms. We knew it at the end because the FDR and the State Department was full of frickin' Marxists. And we know that from the KGB files being open. We turned over in 1949, General Marshall turned over China to the Chinese Communist Party, which was still a small group of guys up in the mountains as almost bandits. We turned it over now. They had, Chiang Kai-shek was no day at the beach. My point is the American people's allies have been the Russian people and have been the Chinese people, okay? There's not been the CCP and it's certainly not been the KGB. The KGB and these guys are bad hombres, okay? Just like the guys in Beijing are. But it doesn't mean the two people. And the last thing we should have ever allowed to happen, and I preach this, we should have never allowed Ukraine to happen. Professor Mersheimer is right. And I'm telling you, Boris Johnson's a fucking war criminal. Okay, for him to go over and stick his dick in this thing at the end and unwind everything was going on is a crime.
I asked Liz Truss about that, who was the foreign minister at the time when Boris Johnson was prime minister, and she denied this fairly long-standing allegation that Boris Johnson, as an emissary of Biden, perhaps kind of blew up those early stage peace negotiations in Istanbul in March, April 2022. Truss was on your show. Has that come up in your discussions at all with her?
No, because I don't even know if she knew what was going on. This is a Boris Johnson trying to be Churchill. Boris Johnson's a fantasist, right? He's a fantasist. He thinks he's the embodiment of Winston Churchill. He kept saying this was his moment. The damn
biographer of Churchill, too. Very
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Wednesday, February 26th, 2025, although it might be Thursday, where our guest is coming from. Pepe Escobar joins us midnight in Moscow. Pepe, always a pleasure.
Always
I want to talk to you. Thank you. I want to talk to you about the resistance gathering in the Middle East. But before we do, to the war in Ukraine, is the war effectively over?
No. On the contrary. And in fact, today there were some serious discussions here that 2025 might be a military year, because essentially the American position and the Russian position, as far as all the shadow play and the posturing goes, they are incompatible positions. And they haven't even started a negotiation.
What is the essence of the incompatibility?
Neutrality of NATO, neutral NATO, no foreign peacekeepers on Russian western borders. The regions have to be recognized as Russian, all of them, because now they are in the Russian constitution that belonging to Russia. Crimea and the 4 regions, Kherson, Zaporozhye, DPR, and LPR. And of course, unblocking all the so-called frozen funds across the West.
Okay, which President Macron told President Trump 2 days ago that French have designs on. Before we get to that, right before we went on air, executive producer Chris said, "We have a surprise for you." Well, this is the surprise. It's the biggest buffoon in the Western world, whose intervention in the spring of 2022 prevented peace between Ukraine and Russia, now boasting, well, I'll let this fool talk in his own words, and I don't even have to tell you who it is, but you'll know in a heartbeat. Chris, cut number 13.
Everybody knows there's a minerals deal on the table today, right? And I think it has every prospect of being signed. And frankly, I think it should be signed because it commits the United States in black and white to a free, sovereign, and secure Ukraine. So what we need now is everybody to be serious and to get real and to listen to what Trump is actually saying and doing and proposing. He said he doesn't mind UK troops on the ground in Ukraine. That's great. Well, then we need to make that real. The US is committed black and white to a free, secure, sovereign Ukraine. You can't have a sovereign country without the ability to decide which clubs you're going to belong to. Sovereign country can remain committed to joining NATO. That's sovereignty. Sovereign country can remain free to allow whatever troops it wants to come on its soil to support it. That's sovereignty. Now, Putin could never accept that. The US has already committed to that. I think Putin is ultimately going to fail and Ukraine is going to succeed.
Good Lord, does he have the slightest idea what he's talking about?
Of course not. He's a buffoon. In fact, a paid buffoon. Now he's a columnist for a British newspaper, very well paid to write buffooneries, which he excels at. If this was a Monty Python sketch, it would be very funny. The problem is this is real.
This is deathly serious. Now, you may have the same opinion of the President of the United States, who earlier today made similar lamentable statements. I say lamentable because you and I know what the Russian position is. Clearly, the American negotiators know what the Russian position is. I don't know what's going through Boris Johnson's mind, and after you listen to this next clip, I don't know what's going through President Trump's mind. Cut number 12.
They spent $350 billion and Europe spent $100 billion. Now, does anybody really think that's fair? But then we find out a little while ago, not so long ago, a few months ago, I found out that the money they spent, they get back. But the money we spent, we don't get back. I said, well, we're going to get it back. And we'll be able to make a deal. And again, President Zelensky's coming to sign the deal. And it's a great thing. It's a great deal for Ukraine, too, because they get us over there. We're going to be working over there. We'll be on the land. And, in that way, there's sort of automatic security because nobody's going to be messing around with our people when we're there. And so we'll be there in that way. But Europe will be watching it very closely. I know that UK has said and France has said that they volunteered to put so-called peacekeepers on the site. And I think that's a good thing.
To his right, but obviously not visible in this, was Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, who must have truly winced when he heard the president say, we'll be on the ground and nobody will mess with our people. And French and British peacekeepers is a good thing. Please dissect this, Pepe.
The easiest way to dissect it is this Trumpian urge of launching something bombastic, 3 or 4 bombasts a day to completely monopolize the news cycle all across the West and beyond. He's a master at doing that. So this is a long-running reality show, non-stop, but with no substance. First of all, because there is no plot line. And nobody explains to the president what is the plot line when you are about to enter an extremely serious negotiation, Ukraine is just one small piece of the puzzle. This is the whole spectrum of US-Russia relations for now and the immediate future, and leading maybe later to a new Yalta. There has to be a new Yalta. But we are all lost into the circus all the time, and 90% of what the president says, I'm sorry, is beyond bullshit.
What is the effect in Moscow, A, of statements like that by the president, which must have reached Moscow by now, it's just a few minutes old, and B, the realization that the Joseph Biden pipeline of ammunition and military equipment to Ukraine is still flowing?
Well, there's some very interesting tidbits, all interrelated. For instance, Russian intelligence, they know that Ukraine more or less have been divided for quite a while among the Europeans. In fact, this is European style, like they divided Sykes-Picot and beyond. So Ukraine, for now, has already been divided in terms of who controls the ports, who control the mines, etc. The Brits, for instance, would control the ports, and the Germans would control the mines, among others. So there is already skin in the game for Europe, and this is one of the reasons why they need this war to go on until, in their minds, in their war minds, there is a strategic defeat of Russia. At the same time, the Russian knows that there are no rare earths west of the Dnieper, or minimal quantities.
Doesn't American intel know that, to advise the president that this deal he's signing for minerals is in the earth on Russian land and not Ukrainian land? How could the Americans possibly mistake that? They're negotiating for nothing.
Or nothing.
They're negotiating for something they can't feasibly get.
So there are two possibilities, Judge. One, the president is being misled by the Intel acronym HELL. Number one. Number two, he can sell this to American public opinion as we're going to get our money back. Nobody knows that how they're going to get their money back, if they get their money back in the long run. The rare earth deposits are over 70% of them in Novorossiya. Now they belong to Russia. Period. Russians know it. That's why they're not saying anything about the 500 billion that is going to be signed maybe before the end of the week in Washington. So basically, Zelensky has nothing to sell. Basically, Russia has all the cards even before the start of the negotiation. So we have this circus, including the signature deal, including the fact that Macron suggested peacekeepers on the ground in Ukraine. Russia will never, and Lavrov had to go on the record again today saying, absolutely no way we're going to accept Western peacekeepers, be they NATO, non-NATO, post-NATO, crypto-NATO on Russia-Western borders. Period.
Okay, so here's Foreign Minister Lavrov before President Trump made the statement that we just ran, as if anticipating the statement that the president would make. Chris, cut number 11.
We cannot consider any options of deploying peacekeepers to Ukraine. I don't know what Macron said there. He did not play his role very convincingly in Washington. But when this topic was raised at a press conference, as I read, President Trump said a decision to deploy peacekeeping forces is possible only with the consent of both parties, apparently meaning us and Ukraine. No one asks us about this.
If the president of the United States said peacekeepers only with the consent of both parties, it's obviously just a political statement because he knows the Russians would never consent. He knows that. He must know that. If he doesn't know that, he's a fool. Secondly, why would he have said what we just ran after and knowing what Foreign Minister Lavrov said?
To confuse the American public opinion that he's already engaged in high-level negotiations when they have not even started, and the Russians are still waiting for anything substantial being proposed by the American side. It's too early. First of all, they need what they're doing now, basically reconnect the diplomatic channels. So we are starting even before scratch. So to say this now is counterproductive. This is creating maybe the illusion among Americans and across the West that there's going to be an equal and a profound negotiation between both sides. There are no signs of that for the moment. Another small detail, Judge. Today I had an off-the-record meeting with Sergei Glaziev, which is one of the most well-informed people in Russia. The only thing that I'm saying, because this is off the record, the only thing that I can say was at the end, as we're both leaving, he said, with his trademark smirk, "This is a very strange war." And this is the feeling.
Loudly. We just got a clip of President Trump saying the weapons will continue. The Biden pipeline will stay open until there's an agreement. Does he really think that he can intimidate President Putin after 3 years of war? But let's play the clip first, and then you can, I haven't seen it yet, but you can respond to it. Chris?
War fighting equipment and the ammunition, that's sustained going forward for Ukraine, and how long is it sustained?
Well, it could go forward for a while, and maybe until we have a deal with Russia. Look, we need to have a deal with Russia, otherwise it's going to continue. It could go on for a while, or it could be settled quickly. I think it's going to be settled quickly. I spoke with President Putin. I think he wants to settle it.
Does he really think that keeping that pipeline flowing will influence the Russian negotiations one iota?
Of course not. And that's why in the beginning of our conversation today, I was saying that there's a sort of consensus that this is going to be a military year, meaning in Russian speak, they will keep advancing. And they'll keep advancing much further than just reconquering the whole of Donetsk, which for the moment is around, let's say, 80%. So there's still 20% to reconquer. They could do that in the next 3 months easily, a sort of spring-summer offensive. And now that the whole front is collapsing in front of everyone's eyes, right? So this could go on during the negotiations for the next 3 to 6 months with an enormous Russian advance, and everybody's confident. And well, I was in Donbass, less than 2 weeks ago, in fact, and the commanders in Donbass between Donetsk and Ugledar, they were basically saying, yes, we're just waiting for that order. And when the order comes, we'll go all the way, no limits. So they are not intimidated by anything. Once again, why? Because they hold all the military cards. And
why does Europe consider Vladimir Zelensky the legitimate president of Ukraine?
But he's not. He's totally illegal. Everybody knows this, that he's totally illegal. In fact, Ukraine is being controlled by a military council, let's put it this way, that is basically all the commands come from this council. And sometimes Zelensky is in the room, sometimes he's not. So he's not the ultimate arbiter anymore. First of all, because he's illegal. And people in Kiev know that he's illegal. So who do you have to negotiate with? Which the Russians are asking all the time. And that's why Putin, as Trump, they both proposed elections. And it's fascinating because can you imagine that Putin and MI6 converge in one key issue, that Zaluzhny should be the next president? Because Zaluzhny is popular, military background, he's respected in Russia, and he respects Gerasimov and his military peers in Russia. And he would be an interlocutor, credible.
Well, how would that happen? The U.S. would have to engineer either an election or a coup, or basically get him to one of his mansions in Miami.
Well, what happens to him is irrelevant, considering that In fact, both parties, in this case, Americans and Russians, they agreed that we need elections, number one. And two, probably Zaluzhny would be elected because he's double or triple more popular than Zelensky. What happens to Zelensky afterwards is immaterial. The Russians want to go after him as a war criminal. And this is extremely serious. So they will go for him as a war criminal. There's no question.
All right. Switching gears to what was to have been the original topic today, which is the resistance. Is Netanyahu perceived internationally as trying to wreck the ceasefire with Gaza?
No question. And perceived all across the global majority, perceived all across the Arab world, the Arab street, the lands of Islam, and the global South, global majority. This experience that I lived this past weekend, Judge, in Lebanon was something, wow, even for us old dinosaurs, is something absolutely extraordinary. We had to go to those villages bordering occupied Palestine to see the senseless destruction after the ceasefire. For instance, in one of the villages that we went, Marun Ras, they were fighting over there for 66 days. Enormous resistance, local Hezbollah resistance. They couldn't conquer the city. So after the ceasefire, they came back and they razed everything to the ground, literally. From uprooting trees to bulldozing streets to booby trapping every single home in Marun Ras. There are more or less 600 residential homes. And when you see this in front of you, it's a mini Gaza in front of you. And when we get back to another village, this one right in front of the border, you know, the western limits of the village of Odessa, there is an Israeli checkpoint. In fact, by the way, some of the soldiers came and they pointed their guns at us. They probably were thinking of intimidating us, right? The same thing. Could not conquer it, came back, razed it to the ground. Some of our Lebanese friends were showing the places where their best friends in town were killed by missile attacks or by FPV drones, etc. So it's a killing machine that is ultimately a revenge killing machine. Because on hand-to-hand combat, when you put Israelis against Hezbollah, for instance, they are, you know, it's ridiculous. And they run away. And they are
how strong and what makes up is the resistance to the Israeli genocide? Of what does it consist and how unified or strong is it?
Extremely strong because it's a spiritually strong resistance. When you talk to the villagers, and then when you talk to Hezbollah commanders, for instance, it's the same mindset of defending their land. For instance, right in front of one of these villages, Marun Ras, it's Lebanese land, in fact, that it was stolen already by Israel. And then right behind it, it's on top of a hill, for instance, overlooking Palestine. Right behind it is occupied Palestine. But right in front of the hill, this is it's their lands. So we have to reconquer our land that was stolen by them years ago. So, and the way the Hezbollah political Islam mindset works is extremely complex because it's a mix of Shiism and communitarian spirit that we don't see in the West anymore. So that's why it strikes us immensely when we are face to face to the way they resisted, to the way they basically expel the invaders, to the way that they are ready to reconstruct their own villages. And when we transpose all that to between 1 million to 1,400,000 people this past Sunday at Nasrallah's funeral in southern Beirut, this was something absolutely outstanding. And everybody's thinking the same way. And they are not revengeful per se. We are just, let us alone. Don't invade our land. Don't bomb us all the time. This is what they're essentially
Well, they're
saying.
going to have to do something militarily because their warm hearts will be met by the cold weapons of the IDF.
Exactly, Judge. And that's what's leading some first-class intellectuals in Beirut. We had a fantastic conversation on Sunday night, in fact. And they're saying, yes, this targeted assassinations that, in fact, the targeted assassinations, they eliminated over 90% of Hezbollah's leadership. We should do the same thing with them. And then they are going to be scared. We are not scared. We know that we're going to, and Nasrallah was saying this all the time, look, we're going to lose a lot of people. It's going to be very bitter. But in the end, our spiritual strengths will predominate. And it is. And when you see this sea of black with those yellow flags inside the stadium, outside the stadium, half of Beirut, we walked outside after the ceremony outside of the, and there were people all over. Beirut was literally converged to it, or the people who were afraid. It's very interesting. You go to a restaurant, for instance, and the waiters, they are Shiites. And then when see that we are foreigners and we were there, they sympathize with us and they thank us as foreigners to be there. It's amazing. As a human spectacle is something that drives you to tears almost.
Pepe, thank you very much. I know it's the middle of the night for you, and I know we were on on a topic different from what we expected to discuss, but your insight has been extremely
Substack and Telegram.
Thank you. And make sure you follow me on Rockfin and particularly also on Rumble. As we know, I did a video last night, and for some reason, YouTube decided it violated community guidelines. They won't tell me why, but at least last time that happened to Mark, they snatched his whole channel and he sometimes got it back. So they can be a bit arbitrary and capricious at times. So make sure you follow me over there on Rumble. And the video from last night, or all of my videos are on Rumble. So if there's ever a video that for one reason or another you find is not on YouTube or somewhere else.
Political censors.
Yeah, right. Rumble's a good place to get it. All right. Guess I'm really pissing off the Europeans right now, but let's start here. Talk about pissed off Europeans. Vance goes over and, slaps them upside the head. Yay, you're overturning elections. You're doing all kinds of evil anti-democracy deeds. Your democracy problem ain't Russia and China. Your democracy problem is in Brussels, right? And what happens? They're like pissed. They cry, literally. They cry, they weep, they moan. And now they go out and literally arrest the leading candidate. I guess it's their way of saying, screw you and your own little democracy speech, Trump people. We'll fix you. We're going to arrest the guy who's about to win an election. I mean, well, if you think about it, that's very, what's the word I'm going to look for? Zelensky-esque of them to arrest literally arrest. I mean, that's what Zelensky does. So why not? Except Zelensky beats the guy a bit, seizes all of his finances, and then, tries to trade him off to Russia for some Nazis. Maybe that's their plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Orwellian definition of democracy. Democracy is arresting the top political candidate, right? I mean, this saga goes on. I mean, first Gorgescu, right, whom is derided in the Western media as a far-right figure. But ultimately, what they hate about him most is he is a Kiev regime skeptic, right? He's not pro-Russian like Orban. He's pro-Romanian, but he doesn't like the Kiev regime, and he certainly doesn't think that Romania should be financially or militarily or otherwise supporting it. And that's his real sin, right? I mean, that's the that's the blasphemy that cannot be accepted, particularly from a country like Romania that is absolutely essential to the Western proxy war on Russia in Ukraine because of the very large border, right, that it shares, right? And it's absolutely necessary to get everything from the south. You know, a considerable portion of U.S. military aid arrives in Greece and other NATO ports to the south there, and then is sent up the Black Sea coast through Romania. Plus, you know, Romania is right there on the Danube, right across from Odessa. It's very important to the war effort. So, I mean, the only thing that could be more important is Poland itself. So Romania is not allowed to, pull out of this proxy war, at least as far as the Europeans are concerned. The Trump administration seems to have a different opinion, or at least some people within the Trump administration have a different opinion. So Gorgescu won a plurality of the vote in the first round, right, of the elections already last year in Romania. And after that, the Supreme Court suddenly declared the election null and void. The whole results of the first round were thrown out because of what they claimed was a Russian-financed TikTok influence campaign. Because, you know, a TikTok campaign was what, you know, almost certainly swayed the majority of Romanian voters to vote for what they call a far-right figure. It turns out, though, that Russia had nothing to do with it, that it was actually one of the mainstream Romanian parties, the center right, that was basically setting this whole thing up. They paid for the TikTok operation and then evidently fed the information that it was Russia. But the investigations from the media there were pretty clear. And so the whole pretext is complete nonsense, right? It was a fallback. And now that they finally agreed to redo the elections, and Gorgescu was that day going to go and register as a candidate, and all the polls in Romania show that he would win and win handily, right? Because there have been very large protests over this whole affair in Romania, and he was arrested. And now he's being charged with misfiling campaign finances,
promoting anti-Semitism. I think that's another one.
I didn't see that one. I did see
Reuters is saying
national security, and I saw organizing a fascist organization. Now, you don't have to agree with Gorgescu on everything. I'm pretty sure I don't. I'm not really concerned with the domestic issues in Romania, but I'm pretty sure that he's not a fascist, because I know what the real fascists are. The fascists, the Banderite fascists, are the ones that the West is supporting in Ukraine, the literal fascists. In fact, there is going to be an anti-Russian march in Berlin this weekend. And one of the big participants of it is the Russia Volunteer Corps and the Free Russian Legion, right? And their leader is a literal neo-Nazi who goes by the Denis Nikitin, also known as Kapustin, who goes by the name White Rex, which is the name of his neo-Nazi clothing label, right? This guy has actually been banned for travel in Europe before. I guess it's gone away, right? But and they are funded by the Kiev regime. They fight for the Kiev regime. These are Russian neo-Nazis. Yes, there are neo-Nazis in Russia, and they fight for the Kiev regime, right? They're going to be headlining this march in Berlin, this anti-Russian march in, the city where Russia overthrew Hitler's regime or the Soviet Union overthrew Hitler's regime in 1945. So this is all so obscene, so Orwellian, so ridiculous. So to charge him with creating a fascist organization is just like, no, you're the fascist. And going out of their way to prevent him from running actually proves who the real fascists are anyway. I mean, that is the I mean, Trump called it authoritarian, but I think it actually, or Vance did, I should say, not Trump personally, but I think it goes a bit beyond that. So, anytime anyone talks about Europe and democracy and political freedoms and everything, just laugh at them. Just laugh at them. Their narrative of themselves at this point is it doesn't even warrant debunking. It is so risible at this point. They are far more, controlling, and the censorship and the deciding what is an acceptable political opinion and what's not. I mean, if I was in Germany and I walked around with one of these St. George ribbons on my lapel, or wore my Z that I often wear on my chest, I would be arrested.
Or even a watermelon pin, because the Palestinian colors, the watermelon thing. If you wear a watermelon pin, or St. George ribbon, or watermelon pin, or the letter Z that stands for Zorro, a great movie. Zorro,
we're
he makes
fighting
the
for
sign of
freedom
the
and
Z.
democracy. We're fighting for freedom and democracy, right? I mean, get over yourselves. Get over yourselves. This is geopolitics, and you're on the losing end of this particular stick. So, I am surprised that they are being this blatant after the U.S. called them out at the way J.D. Vance did at the Munich Security Conference. I predict that this is not the last thing that the Trump administration will have to say over this affair.
Do you feel like this, Mark? Do you feel like this? As soon as I saw that, particularly in light of the fact that this was an area that J.D. Vance specifically mentioned, Romania.
Yes,
He
specifically
mentioned that, right?
Romania.
So I'm talking about your Romania, you're talking about your Romania, and they do this. It's not just okay, we're going to do this because we don't want to guide them. It's a big middle finger. You know what I mean? It's a big FU to J.D. Vance and the Trumpy people and all of the people that are saying, hey, you guys, look, come on, you're talking about democracy. What the hell are you doing here? It's a big, like an FU. Even this this thing they're going to have in Berlin with a bunch of Nazis goose stepping all over creation again. And it's like, now they're like, we'll fix Trump. We'll show him that we're going to fight back and watch this, Trump. If you think you're going to tell us what to do with democracy, we'll show you democracy. Boom, we're going to grab your boy and we're going to arrest him. Not that he's anybody's boy, but you know what I mean?
I heard reports this week that the Trump administration has also, along with U.S. aid, put a hold on everything that the National Endowment for Democracy, the other big regime change, color revolution, U.S. influence in other countries, institution. And I'm like, well, now they could actually use it. I mean, you could actually use the National Endowment for Democracy legitimacy against the powers in Romania that are preventing actual democracy from occurring right now. Which is a shame. It would be ironic. See, on some level, we know that the EU technocrats, right, the ones that rule the roost in Brussels and through many of the member states in their governments, are this type of postmodern liberal, right? That is, again, Orwellian in that they claim absolute freedom, and then they block anything that anyone else, they ban and block and everything that anyone else finds offensive, which is just like, it's absurd. They in so doing, they become more authoritarian. They're kind of like authoritarian liberals. I mean, is that
Yeah,
a thing?
I put it like this. Traditionally, when people talk about ultra nationalist, right? Ultra nationalist, what they really mean is, fascism, right? I call them ultra liberals, because if you take, to me, your ideology, whatever it is, and you take it to this ultra extreme level, right? It becomes outrageous. It becomes a caricature of whatever, ultra nationalist becomes a caricature of nationalism and ultra liberalism. Right now, this is like the evil, like the bizarro world with a Superman bizarro world. You know what I mean? It becomes this evil. Like, how many times have you seen even the Star Trek Captain Kirk, where there'll be a show or a movie and a guy will come out from another dimension who's like the opposite Garland or whatever, and that person's evil? And that's what ultra becomes. So this ultra liberalism is a totalitarian fascist liberalism that says we're doing it for good stuff, to save the minorities and the gay people and all of the people that need women, blah, blah, blah. What do you got to do? We got to pretty much align with Nazis, kill a lot of innocent people, start wars, and of course censor everybody, because how else could you help the minorities, Mark? What's wrong with you? You don't want to help the minorities.
Yeah, I'm all for the Russian minority in countries like Latvia and Lithuania, Estonia, and Ukraine, right? Anyway, but those minorities don't deserve any rights. No cultural rights, no language rights, no political rights, no religious rights, no press rights, no rights at all. It's interesting. I think Gorgescu falls into the category of the populist right that Orban is accused of being in, that some other figures in Europe, or maybe you could even just say populists, because Robert Fico is a populist left, hard left, right? Like old communist left, right? And really, I think what it is that the Brussels and most of the countries in Europe have long since established a form of managed democracy, where there's an accepted center-right, center-left shuffle, right? And every once in a while, you get so sick of the corruption and the inaction and that nothing happens. You vote out the guys, and the only other guys you can vote for, right, because of the way the political calculus comes down, is the other center-right party, the center-right, center-left, this triangulation of politics. And that keeps everything nice and managed. But lately, in a whole host of European countries, you've had figures on the right and left, right, always referred to as far, emerge, that are not part of that triangulated hegemonic center. And, the Le Pen people in the National Rally Party in France, the AfD in Germany, Robert Fico's leftists in Slovakia, Viktor Orban, the Law and Justice Party, of course, in Hungary, and now we've got Gorgescu in Romania, and among other things, right? The continuation and the slow attempt to create a centralization of power in Brussels is not to be opposed, right? To create a united subjects of Europe, or I don't want to call it states of Europe, United Subjects of Europe, right? This attempt to turn the EU into an to a nation destructing machine, except in the East, where the nationalists are useful as a bulwark against the Russians. Their nationalism is promoted, right, in the Baltics and Poland and those countries there. But obviously, the nationalists in Romania and Hungary have gone astray, because they don't want any part of this anti-Russian foreign policy mission. And ultimately, that is the one thing that is for this triangulation of power and politics. You can't have a diversion from the foreign policy orthodoxy in Brussels and the member states, in support of U.S.-led Western hegemony. And what's ironic is that in the United States, that has long been the same situation until Trump. emerging from the populist right. So the Europeans clearly identify it as a very real threat. And now the hegemon itself, because the Republican Party over the last decade has not been able to stop Trump's rise to power through their own ranks. He basically co-opted one of the the center parties, the center right, the Republicans, and he is changing it, right? There's always a question of, is it changing him or is he changing it? And during the Trump's first administration, I think you wouldn't be far off the mark to say that it was changing him, that it had taken control of him. I mean, his own officials like John Bolton bragged about manipulating him into doing, what the neocons wanted anyway. But Trump is obviously making an attempt, right, both domestically and in foreign policy to break away with that in his second administration. So he's breaking that foreign policy orthodoxy, and it's effectively the hegemon itself defecting from the role of hegemon, because Trump sees the role of hegemon, as far as I can tell, to be too costly in terms of money, political power, economics, everything, and not getting enough return. So it's not like the U.S. wants to stop being a superpower or a fading superpower or a great power, or it just doesn't want to fund the rest of hegemony, right? Economically or militarily. It sees that it's gotten a raw deal that way. And part of that is a bit of leaning up, because it's got to slough off some of the responsibility onto Europe and other countries if it wants to get serious about pivoting to China, to confront what they see as their greatest opponent and so forth. And the US has been trying to pivot to China since Obama, but events keep happening, right? I mean, Russia keeps being inconvenient, and the Middle East and everything else. And they've been unable to do that. And so Trump is trying to pivot from China, and he seems to be trying to drop the whole responsibilities of hegemony along with it. That's why the constant refrain, Europe has to pay their own way, right? If they want to give Ukraine security guarantees, that has to be them. They have to spend more on defense, right? We would like eventually to pull our troops out of Europe, right? They're not saying it's going to be anytime soon, but they said they would like to. Why? So that they can send them to China, right? Or at least, to the Pacific on the borders with China. If they put them in Taiwan, it is China. That is, what's going on here. And Gorgescu is in Europe. Obviously, they're not coming to grips. They intend to, at times, attempt to manipulate, at times attempt to ignore, and at times confront Trump and hope that in 4 years he goes away and the U.S. is back to form again as the hegemon, like it was under Biden. And they hope to last Trump out. We'll see how well that goes, because if Trump does manage to, to some degree effectively win his civil war, political war at home against the deep state, well, then he'll be able to concentrate on Europe. And I think that Trump really does see a degree of political similitude between his populist right and populist right figures like Orban and Gorgescu in Romania. You're all familiar with the Liberal International, right? Well, maybe this is a populist right international, right? Why not? If they have, they're never going to agree on everything, but if they have a degree of political and geopolitical agreement on a lot of things, the way that, let's say, Orban and Trump seem to do, well, then, why not? Why wouldn't they? Just because you have nationalist views, right? Even if it's, shall we say, populist nationalists, doesn't mean that you are, opposed to nationalism in every other country.
Well, and let me add this. There were, and God knows they have their flaws, but at one point, there were some semi-left populist people that were running a Jeffrey Corbyn and a Bernie Sanders. Now, granted, since then, there's been lots of things that we could complain about them. But my point is, with them, notwithstanding who those guys are and what they've done since, there was a left-wing populist sentiment starting to arise at the same time that Trump, the right-wing populist sentiment started to arise, and the so-called left-wing populist sentiment wiped theirs out. They crushed it. They took Corbyn out.
The
They took
Democrats
Bernie
in the
out.
U.S.
And the Labor, they took them out. They ran them out of their own parties. Those guys could have been flawed, but there was a populist sentiment, and I'm sure other people would have arisen, and that populist sentiment was arising, and they smothered it in the crib.
Yeah.
And so people were left with nothing, but there were people that were like, well, I'm afraid we're going to get nuked. I think I'll vote for Trump. They didn't agree with him on a lot of economic things, but they looked at foreign policy. You left them with no other healthy option to have a left-wing populism, because that's what we'd ended up with, a right-wing populism. And they could have battled it out and people could have chosen it. It could have been healthy. That wasn't happening. They created an environment on themselves where the Trumps and these types of people were the only option. And when people looked at these monsters, they looked at Ursula von der Leyen and Macron and his filthy ilk, and they looked at Trump and they're like, Trump's starting to look real good. When I look at, Baerbock, these people are incompetent. These people are corrupt. These people are Nazis. They're supporting Nazis. They're downright Nazis. And these people don't give a crap about the people of their country. They want a supranational alliance that gets rid of all democracy. And if you look at the history, they created this monster. They created this dynamic. And now, as I said, I think this is an open punch at Trump. That's your boy and you like him. This is a way we can take a shot. We don't have a lot of ways to take a shot at you, Trump, but that's a way we can take a shot at you. And I think the Trump people know it.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of the calculus, right? I was trying to think of what is the opposite of populist? I guess elite, right? We want to call these institutional elite parties, right? I still think that the keeping Romania on board with regards to the centralization of power in the EU, and of course keeping them on board with Project Ukraine is more important.
And that block, stopping that block. There's an anti-NATO bloc, a kind of, I'm not even going to call it nationalist, but how about this? A block of people who say we're like concerned about the cost of food and electricity in our own country, and we're not going to get involved in foreign policy that hurts the people of our own country. Yeah. That block is growing in the East. And I think it was like, we got to stop that block. If that block grows to Romania, you know what I mean? We're screwed. And so they just said, we can take a shot at Trump. And at all costs, we got to stop that block from growing to Romania.
It's not necessarily an anti-NATO block in that they're against NATO, at least not the way NATO is usually presented as, right? As a purely defensive organization, right? They're not against that, right? Who is against that? But they're against what NATO has become, particularly in the post-Cold War, post-Soviet Union, right, world, right? It has become the primary vehicle for geopolitical consolidation of the European continent, and as a platform, a vehicle for power projection of the hegemon of the U.S. in Europe. In fact, the last head of the last Secretary General of NATO, Stoltenberg, when he was arguing with Trump in his first administration, why NATO is so important to the United States, why European members of NATO. He's like, through us, you can more conveniently project power, i.e. bomb and invade, countries in the Middle East through Europe without us. You know, we wouldn't be able to do that. Never mind that Turkey, which isn't a part of the EU, but is a part of NATO, is actually far more useful in that regard. Although Turkey doesn't always necessarily play ball with those games, at least not unless they get a nice sweetener in the deal, because that's the way Erdogan rolls. So, yeah, I think that there's certainly no hesitation to go after Gorgescu, even after the Trump administration opened up and singled that out, which certainly is a challenge. It is a slap in the face, whatever else it also is, right? So I'll be interested to see what the Trump administration has to say publicly about that. And you know, hey, if you're going to if you're not going to get rid of the U.S. aid and the National Endowment for Democracy, if you're just going to leash them and reform them, well, maybe you could sick them on Romania.
Yeah, on the opposite. Let me ask you this: what the heck is going on? Something I don't understand, and you may understand, particularly with Russia's cultural ties to Serbia. There's some leader getting arrested, and odd things, strange things going on in Serbia, and address
Serbia.
it. Huh?
Not Serbia.
Okay.
The Srpska Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Okay, now
ethnic area.
Keep in mind, a person like me who doesn't understand any of this, so make it real easy to understand what's going on.
Okay,
there.
so after the first war that broke up Yugoslavia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is an absolute artificial bullshit construction country, it ties together an ethnic Albanian or a Muslim area. Ethnic Albanian is not correct, but a Muslim area together with a Croat area and a Serbian ethnic area into one country. Essentially kind of Yugoslavia writ small, but on under the West's control rather than say as an independent neutral country. And this is all shrunk down. And essentially, the whole politics of Bosnia-Herzegovina since then has been kind of paralyzed because the Serbian part of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Republika Srpska, keeps rejecting all attempts to turn the Bosnia-Herzegovina into a little, loyal little Western statelet and in the Balkans there. And now they're going after the president of the Republika Srpska, Dodik, because, well, I mean, for a number of reasons. They've been building up against him for years. But, of course, his support for Serbia, his constant arguments that Republika Srpska should separate from Bosnia-Herzegovina and rejoin Serbia in some fashion. It's another shot. It is about consolidating Europe, right? It's an ongoing geopolitical process, right, to bring Bosnia-Herzegovina into NATO and the EU and all of this. But there's also a project involved too. If Russia is winning in Ukraine, then we poke them in any way they can, including poking all of their allies, friends, co-religionists, whatever it is. And that includes, right, destabilizing Serbia. And a follow-on from that is destabilizing the Republika Srpska in Bosnia-Herzegovina. So to some extent, this is, I believe, at some level, that's certainly not the sole motivation, but at some level, part of this motivation is to stick it to Russia and anyone who is friendly to Russia or not on board with the Kiev regime in Ukraine, and that certainly defines the president of the Republic of Srpska as well. Although there's plenty of domestic things with regards to the the Republic of Srpska and Bosnia Herzegovina, and the the political paralysis, because one third of the country has always been able to effectively veto the consolidation of Bosnia Herzegovina into Western political and military structures, and they're just choosing this particular time to go after him. It's nonsense, but I mean, who's going to protest? I mean, it's like what's happening in Gorgescu, like right now to Gorgescu. They're doing this because they're all the gloves are off, all the masks are off, and they're just cleaning house now in ways that they have felt some political restraints before, but now all the restraints, all the pretenses, all the masks are off, and they hope to, I don't know what, because they're just going to provoke a civil war in Bosnia Herzegovina. I mean, do they think that the people of the Republic of Srpska are just going to accept this and accept whatever official they would like to rule? I don't see that as particularly being the case any more than in Serbia, right? Certainly not yet. Maybe over time, enough generations, they'll have been EUified, the next generation enough. But in both Serbia and Republic of Srpska in Bosnia Herzegovina, that process has not reached the point where the people have completely lost their sense of national identity, ethnicity, culture, however you want to term it.
And I feel like same, to some extent with Romania, in that the people went to the streets. They know what's happening. And I think it'll particularly piss off the Trump administration because they tried to lock up Trump. I mean, that's basically what they did with Trump. You know what I mean? They grabbed him, they, arrested him, they took pictures of him, they they charged him with, mopery on the high seas, anything they could think of. They made up lots of charges against him. So I think that's going to be of a particular nerve. I think that's going to be a particular nerve to the Trump administration. Oh, by the way, guys and girls, you guys can become members. And Branko R has just become a YouTube member. It's like $3 or $4 a month or something. So anybody can be a member. That's great. Certainly appreciate it. Let me ask
Branko R, you are the man today.
Yes, sir. Hopefully Branko is man. But yes, you are the man. Anyway, so let's Mark. Is it today or tomorrow? They're meeting again in Riyadh, I believe. Your thoughts on
Istanbul.
Huh? Istanbul. Right. Okay. Your thoughts on the ongoing.
Don't get too excited. All right. So the first round of meetings between the U.S. and Russia in Riyadh, right? They weren't really talking about Ukraine at all. At least that's not what they tell us, right? It was starting back at the beginning and starting of restoring diplomatic relations, right? Normalization of diplomacy, right? They set up a consultative body. They put out each other's initial starting positions on Ukraine, and then they agreed to appoint people who will later negotiate, the issue of Ukraine. But they haven't even gotten that far yet, right? And that was it. But at least they were talking to each other, right? Now, what they're doing in Istanbul is, again, this restoration of normal diplomatic relations that has been destroyed so much. And specifically, it's about embassy staff and the functioning of the embassies in each other's countries, as initiated by the Biden administration and then reciprocated, quid pro quo by Russia. The two embassies in each other's countries have been reduced to a skeleton staff. I mean, literally, they can't do anything. They're not processing visas. They're not doing anything. They're not able to do any type of consular work. They're not able to do any diplomatic work. In fact, the U.S. actually seized Russian diplomatic facilities, like property that Russia, some small things that Russia owned in the United States. And that's certainly probably something that they'll be talking about. Russia would very much, simply as a matter of diplomatic norms, and honor, they want those returned to them. Right. And I don't know if that will be the primary subject, but I know that the restoration of embassy staff and normal work, right, is what the primary talk will be about in Istanbul. At least that's what's put out publicly. And I have no reason to believe that it's anything else at this point. I know that the Trump people were all for, let's let Putin and Trump meet yesterday and solve the Ukraine conflict. And the Russians are like, whoa there, you're putting the cart before the horse. This isn't the way this works. There's a process, right? And let's restore normal diplomatic relations first and actually have, diplomats and embassy that are able to conduct these negotiations, right? Because it's not going to be settled like some New York real estate deal, right? That's not the way it works. And so very much Russia is trying to put some order and in this process. I also think they're going to try and drag it out forever because they don't believe that the U.S. will ever agree to what they want. So they just want to get the U.S. tied into the process and get as much normalization on other things out of it as they can. But it's really interesting. This week there was a piece, even in RT, quoting Sergei Ryabkov, whom is the deputy foreign minister, probably after Lavrov, probably the highest ranking figure. There's not an exact hierarchy, the guy in the foreign ministry. And he's probably the one who will take the lead, right? Even if he's not doing negotiating, he'll still have the lead position, at least administratively, over any eventual U.S.-Russia negotiations on Ukraine. And he said Russia doesn't understand Trump's peace plan. And we don't. It was put by other officials more bluntly, in other terms, right, referring to the first meeting as a train wreck, because the Americans have no idea what they're doing. They have no plan, right? Basically I would actually argue that's a good thing. I would actually argue that the Americans aren't coming with a fiat plan and presenting it to the Russians is, I think, an assessment that whatever plan they started with, right, call it the Kellogg plan or whatever, is completely, a non-starter, right? Things have gone way past that, right? And Russia's winning far too decisively and has too many cards in this particular situation. So, but on the other hand, it's also clear that right now there's no driving push towards a plan. In fact, the negotiations on Ukraine haven't even started yet. Right?
How about this, Mark? If I throw this at you, in a way, it kind of benefits both parties to let it go a little bit and to let Ukraine be weakened. Number one, because of the issue of leverage. And here's what I mean. Russia, whoever they're negotiating with, the more they win, the more land they take, the weaker Ukraine's military gets, the more leverage they have. Trump doesn't need leverage over the Russians because Trump wants to deal with the Russians and the Russians want to deal with Trump. He wants out of there. Trump's got bigger fish to fry. It's clear they're economic, right? Trump wants as much leverage as he can get over the Europeans. So both Russia and Trump, the more trouble that the Ukraine has, the more internal conflict that arises. They're at each other's throats in Kiev. We're hearing all kinds of stuff going on there. The more that happens, it actually gives Trump more leverage against the Europeans to say, look, we need a deal. Ukraine's in real trouble. I would make that argument that if I'm the Trump team, I'm not in all of that rush, much of a rush. Trump wants a deal quickly, but by the same token, weakening Ukraine, letting things happen there has its advantages, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Russia's not interested in a deal quickly because they know that the Americans aren't ready for any deal that gives Russia everything they want. And then the Americans might understand that at some level too. Now, kind of an interesting, I want to call it an interesting interlude, right, that has come up and kind of put all of this negotiations on pause is this very curious Ukraine. It's being called a rare earth deal, but now it's about all of Ukraine's natural and other resources deal with the U.S. That after Zelensky first suggested it to Trump, right? Because he wanted to speak Trump's language. So why the U.S. should keep supplying arms to the Kiev regime, could continue supporting Ukraine, is because we've got all of these natural resources, right? We've got all of these minerals, all of these rare earths, and it's a fortune, right? There's all this just laying in the ground. Ukraine should be the richest country in the world, and we've got more minerals than God or whatever. First of all of this is ridiculous and ridiculously overblown, and it's like a used car salesman trying to present his wares as being completely more than they are, right? Particularly all this stuff about rare earths. Okay. First of all, rare earths aren't all that rare, right? That's the first thing. Second of all, depending on where the deposits are on the surface, deep in the earth, how spread out they are, usually mining rare earths involves the most destructive strip mining, complete destruction that you can imagine, where you just basically dig up huge amounts of earth and everything on top of it and filter it, right, to get out tiny little nuggets, almost like mining gold, right?
Gold on a larger scale.
Yeah, on a profitable and practical level. And the reason why these rare earths in Ukraine haven't been developed already is because actually it's probably not very practical or profitable to mine them, right? Not now. Maybe sometime in the future, whatever. And Russia has recently pointed out, hey, we got a lot more rare earths, right, than Ukraine does. But anyway, this has been a kind of selling point. And originally, Trump treated this like, yeah, let's do a deal. And then, but suddenly, within a few days, that shifted to, yeah, let's do a deal, not for future arms deliveries and support, but that's what you owe us, right? We're not giving you any more. That's what you owe us for what Biden gave you, right? We're going to get our money back. And Ukraine's like, are you serious? That was given to us, right? That was grants. It was given to us, right? There was no deal. We're not going to pay you back for that now. And Trump's like, oh, yes, you are. Because he's the mafia don, right? Not defending the Kiev regime in any way, shape, or form, but, he's basically, this is economic colonialism of the most ridiculously obvious kind. No, the first deal that they brought to Kiev, that was literally signing over Ukraine to the United States. It didn't only include natural resources, it also declared that 50% of everything that the Ukraine makes, even on ports and infrastructure, gets given to the United States. And I don't know if they were ever really serious, like they ever expected him to sign it. Maybe they were just doing it as a so that he would have to refuse it, and then that would create further distance from them. If the Trump administration wants to be distanced from Zelensky, from the regime in Ukraine, that's a possibility at least to consider. But they must have been like, do you think he'll sign it? No, even he won't sign that, right? I have to think that's the conversation. Well, now they've got a deal 2.0. And supposedly this creates a joint fund, and then a certain amount of the profits on Ukraine's natural resources, supposedly including oil and gas, right? We don't are supposed to go into this fund, and then the U.S. can withdraw from it. It sounds like a complicated corruption scheme to me. It sounds similar to what Burisma did with Joe Biden and everything. We don't know the detail. We don't know all the details yet. We just know a few references. But there's a lot of intrigues going on with this, and Trump has been asked, what does Ukraine get out of this deal? And he pointed out that, well, we've given them a lot of stuff already, but he also said they get the right to fight on. And I find that, and Russia, by the way, the Russian government was like, what?
But I interpreted what he said a little bit differently if I listened to it. I interpreted it a little bit differently. What I interpreted from when he said this was, I interpreted it in a past tense. If you listen to the exact words, it can be interpreted as they've been able to do this. We gave them money. They were able to fight on. He didn't say they were able to. In listening to it, I have analyzed that. It can certainly be viewed as the right to fight on now.
Yeah,
but equally, based on the verbiage, it could be they had the right to fight on. Now, if I look at it in the context of everything else he's saying, it certainly appears that he's saying they had the right to fight on. All this time they couldn't, because he also goes on to say this thing would have been over in no time if it wasn't for us. So my interpretation of it is just to say they could fight on because we gave them money. If we hadn't given them money, they couldn't have continued to fight on. So at any rate, go ahead. I just wanted to throw you out that I have a little bit of different interpretation.
I don't have an interpretation of that yet, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, that's really vague, and I don't know what it means. But it definitely, alarm bells started going off there, right? And I don't know what he means by that, and I don't know that anyone knows, outside the administration knows what he means by that now. But certainly they suddenly started paying a lot more attention in the Kremlin. You can be absolutely sure. So we don't have any clarity on that. I don't know if there is any clarity yet, because Zelensky's coming to the U.S. and he's supposedly going to sign this, right? Now, whether he's actually going to sign it, I don't know. And this is really interesting because there's also been reports that this is going to be signed by minister level people. And this is a big difference, right? Because one of the arguments that Russia has been making is that because Zelensky's official term of president has expired and he's extending presidential powers under martial law, that he's not the legitimate president, that Ukraine constitution doesn't allow this. And so that anything they sign with him in terms of negotiations would have no validity, no legal validity, in Ukraine for future Ukrainian leaders or anything. And lately, Trump administration, including Trump himself, has brought that up and referred to that Zelensky. He even said Zelensky is a dictator without elections, right? And we've heard from Waltz, we've heard from Kellogg, others that elections should be held in Ukraine. But if they get this, if this deal goes through and Zelensky signs it, that means that the U.S. accepts that Zelensky is Ukraine's leader, right? And you're going to see an end to that. So that you want to ask what the Kiev regime is getting out of it. One of the things they are hoping to get out of it is legitimacy for Zelensky. No more question of elections or calling him a dictator or anything like that. I think that's what they think. Now we'll have to see. We'll have to see what comes out.
Oh, they trust Trump. Oh, they trust Trump way too. He will take everything they got, and the next day throw them right back. He'll pull them out of the bus for a couple of hours. Sure, sign right here. Oh, hey, slide that bus a little closer. Right back under the bus.
When Zelensky got this second deal, he supposedly was saying no again already, because what he wants is security guarantees from the U.S. And the Trump administration so far has held firm on no security guarantees from us. You talk to Europe. We're not interested in that game anymore, right? Now, he's never come out and said no more weapons for Ukraine, right? He said that the U.S. isn't sending any weapons now, and that's false. That is either a lie or he's interpreting it to mean one thing, no new weapons or whatever, because the U.S. is still delivering weapons to Ukraine. That's what the reports on the ground say. Things that were already being sent by Biden, being ordered through the military-industrial complex. All of that, continues. But there's an open question of these security guarantees, because Zelensky said, no, without any security guarantees, no deal. But then the Europeans, in particular, evidently Boris Johnson, came to him and said, sign it. The security guarantees are something that we can discuss or fudge later. Just keep on board for now. So there is a hope that if the U.S. sees enough economic interests in Ukraine, like if they believe that they've bought this, never mind the articles even in Forbes that point out that 70% of Ukraine's mineral resources are in territory already controlled by Russia, right? We'll put that to the side for now. But what the Europeans and the Ukrainians, the Kiev regime, are hoping to do here is to rope the U.S. back into, giving them an interest that they feel they have to protect, right, in Ukraine, which would be things that Trump believes are his now because of a deal, right? That's their game now. They're hoping to get de facto security guarantees by giving the U.S. an interest in their country. I'm not sure whether it's going to work that way or not. I'm not so sure how serious Trump is about all of this. I think that he would have had briefings by people telling him that all of this hubbub about massive Ukrainian mineral resources is vastly overinflated and it's going to require huge amounts of infrastructure and time to get anything out of it, much less, the conflict that's going on. And the Europeans, Macron came to Trump in Washington already and has already been kicked to the side without getting anything. And Starmer is there today, I believe, the British Prime Minister. And they wanted to come together. And I guess Trump demanded to meet them both separately. And they're pushing Trump on security guarantees, not for Ukraine, but for themselves. They are promising, they've come up with a plan now to put 30,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine, supposedly once a ceasefire comes into effect. Right? They want to put 30,000 troops on the ground, not on the front lines, but hiding somewhere back in Ukraine. And they're not even calling them peacekeepers anymore. They got a new woke term for them, reassurance forces, right? However, it turns out that those troops need security guarantees there from the United States, because everyone knows that Russia would just target and roll them, right, if combat resumed. So they want air defense, they want air cover, they want logistics, they want intelligence from the United States. And that's what they're pressing. That's what they're pressing Trump on. It's all part of a combined effort now between Kiev and Europe to manipulate and rope Trump back into Ukraine and perhaps even into direct war with Russia. Russia, meanwhile, is saying, hello, we're here. We said no ceasefire. We have no interest in a ceasefire. We're not giving you any ceasefire, right? We've been down that road twice before. It's not happening again. Until there's a final settlement, we keep going on the ground. No ceasefire. What don't you understand? Why are you talking troops after a ceasefire? Because there will be no ceasefire, right? And they've also said, and no matter what, no NATO member troops in Ukraine, right? Whether they're wearing NATO hats or EU member state hats, it doesn't make any difference. They're targets, right? No, none. So Russia has double netted.
Do you remember a little kid's book called Green Eggs and Ham? I call it the Europe's green eggs and ham plan. Will you eat green eggs and ham? No. Will you eat them on a plane? I will not eat them on a plane. Will you eat them on a train? I will not eat them. Will you eat them on a bus? I will not eat them on a bus. Right? And that's okay, Trump. Here's the deal. Peacekeepers in Ukraine. No peacekeepers in Ukraine. Will you have peace? Will you have them on a train?
I like that.
No. Will you have them in a plane? I will not have peacekeepers in Ukraine. I will not have them on a plane. I would
go with the peace creepers.
Yeah, the peace creepers. Yeah, peace creepers. That's what it is. Peace creepers. It's the green eggs and ham. They just keep asking them. Not on a plane, not on a train, not on a bus. No peace creepers.
I will not accept your peace creepers.
Exactly. And they just can't get it. I'm going to show you a picture, Mark. This to me is what Europe is to Trump right now. It was a funny movie. It was a movie called My Super Ex-Girlfriend, right? Now, you're now looking at Trump in Europe, the US and Europe, right? She's Europe. And it was the deal with the crazy ex-girlfriend.
Okay, I'm going to go right on the board and say Annalena Baerbock does not look like that.
No.
I'm just,
No.
you got to say it.
But
Von der Leyen?
every bit is-
No.
No, but every bit is crazy. It was the old crazy. It was what was the Jodi Arias, right? The dangerous. It's the ex-girlfriend that the guy has, and she's beautiful and seems great until he says, "I'm breaking up with you." And then she turns, then the horns and the fangs come out, right? That's Europe. Europe was like, the US was like, this is my girlfriend, Europe. She's pretty. She's nice. Look at her. She has the news. Oh boy, she's got schnitzel over here. And she's got all these things. Amsterdam, Denmark, right? And then when they decide to break up with her, she turns out to be completely and totally insane. And that's what they got right now. They got a girlfriend that they're trying to break up with, and she is totally and completely insane. And now they're like, oh my God, she's absolutely nuts. And that's the way I see it. Not to keep coming out with all of these analogies from green eggs and ham and peace creepers, but I think peace creepers, we accidentally came up with something pretty good here with peace creepers. But yes, she's the crazy ex-girlfriend. When you try to break up with her, you find out she was a chainsaw massacre person all along.
Okay, so I've never seen Super Ex-Girlfriend, so I can't make a relation there. But all of this noise coming from Macron and Starmer about troops, both at times when their own military and own press have been reporting about what a pathetic state both of their respective militaries are in. The UK's, to be fair, even worse than France's, right? But I mean, they're not paper tigers, because even on paper they look awful. They look pathetic, right? But all this noise coming from them to me, right, speaks of a particular favorite of mine from Shakespeare, Macbeth. The quote, if you're thinking of Macron or Starmer making all of these promises, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
You know what? I think you've just outdone my peace creepers. Peace creepers is good, but it ain't.
No. At a certain, okay, so elevate the academic level of discussion thing, yes. But if we're talking memeable, right, peace creeper is going to be what everyone's saying in the comments tomorrow.
Exactly. Anybody who doesn't look up.
More deeply into this a little bit later in the show with Owen Schroyer from InfoWars. All right, let's talk about the Epstein files. We just got, we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into this a little bit later in the show with Owen Schroyer from InfoWars to kind of met out some of this. Is this like a limited hangout? But first, we just kind of want to bring you the breaking news out of DC, because we're all sort of watching how is this being rolled out. And there's really, honestly, there's a war going on right now in the intelligence community, specifically between the DOJ, it looks like, and the FBI. But Nick Sorter posted this a short time ago. Alina Habba says that she just met with Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and does expect the Epstein list to come out today, describing it as shocking. Habba says that she absolutely expects criminal charges to come as a result. Arrests need to come quickly to these fiends, Nick writes. So then in DC today, there was this like dog and pony show where, and some of these people are our friends, so I'm not discounting that they were called. And of course, if Redacted was called and said, hey, would you like to come to the White House and receive a binder of Epstein information, I'd be there 100%. But this is how it was being handled today. You had influencers, folks like Liz Wheeler and DC Drano. Here's Liz Wheeler posting that she got a binder of Epstein files today, exclusive, she writes. Well, it's not exclusive because there were a number of other influencers there next to her, and here's a whole host of them. There's on the left, there's DC Drano, Rogan O'Hanley, who's a lawyer. There's Liz Wheeler. There's a number of other individuals there, Jack Posobiec, and others. Again, friends of the show, and fine, they get access to these files, whatever these are. Now, Redacted has learned, our team has learned through sources that these binders are nothing more than publicly available Epstein information. This is all public. So everything that's in these binders, according to sources on the Redacted team, this is all from our own reporting that these are all publicly available information.
So then it's just merchandise? It's just Epstein merchandise?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just collated nicely. You know, like
what
someone
is
has
the
like
optics of this?
someone like has a whole blog, like they've written, thousands of blog posts over the years, and then they and then they collate it nicely into a binder. So I'm not exactly sure, but here's a group, there's the group of influencers. Here's Rogan O'Hanley, here's Simon Godek says, Epstein was.
He says Epstein was most likely a Mossad agent. We've had Whitney Webb on this show so many times to flush that out. She has 2 books on the matter, but that does seem like something anybody who studies Epstein does not seem to think that is a stretch. So he's saying that the influencers here seem to be very pro-Israel. Is that a connection that we can make? It's early. We're all having knee-jerk reactions, but the fact that the people there, so again, are we going to get actually that connection? We've been waiting to hear from Whitney Webb because she's going to be able to parse out. She's the one, obviously, who knows this in depth, and she's going to be able to say, we've been given this in order to not see this.
Here's Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who says, I nor the task force were given or reviewed the Epstein documents being released today. A New York Post story just revealed that the documents will simply be Epstein's phone book. This is not what we or the American people asked for. Get us the information we asked for instead of leaking old information to the press. Now, you'll recall members of Congress have been calling on the Attorney General's office to get this information. They've been asking them privately to give them the information, and they've not heard. People had to jump on social media to put pressure on the Attorney General's office. But it turns out then we learned that the FBI has been destroying evidence. So there, and Kash Patel is in there, I guess, trying to stop that from happening. It's hard to say at this point. I've heard from separate sources at the FBI today who told me that there are terabytes of data inside the FBI that apparently was part of this destroyed evidence. Now, those terabytes of data and those pieces were video evidence from Epstein's house in New York City and from his island. Terabytes of video footage, which may or may not include Bill Clinton, as eyewitnesses have said, with younger women inside on Epstein Island.
Would
or
that
those
be a
individuals
shock,
in his house.
given the Lewinsky scandal? Come on.
No, it's not a shock at all, but we deserve to see this video footage. If you're going to give us like a phone book of redacted names of victims, that's one thing. We want to see the video footage that you have access to. But if the FBI has been actively destroying it to cover their tracks, this is what we want answers from Kash Patel on. So there is definitely a war going on. I mean, you can sugarcoat it any way you want, but this is exactly happening here. Now, here's a letter that was also just leaked a few hours hours ago from AG Bondi to Director Patel. I don't know if we verified if this is.
It is verifiable because I think that the influencers that were pictured there have published this. So I believe this is in the files that they received. And this is from AG Bondi to Director Patel saying, before you came into office, I requested the full Epstein file, but I've only received 200 pages, which are flight logs, contact lists, and a list of victims' names and phone numbers. But I know I have been informed that there's more. This is not all of it. And you are instructed to give me all of it. Now, she's been on many times since the cabinet meeting, says, you know, all of us cabinet members are friends. We've worked together. So this is something that she's sending to a contemporary, someone she knows well, is Kash Patel. And she's saying, now that you're in there, I expect all of it, please. Right now, it's friendly. But if you look at this post from Marjorie Taylor Greene, it may not remain that way. She is saying, Marjorie Taylor Greene said just minutes ago, this is a war raging within the government. She says it is coming. There will be more, but the resistance will be beaten and the truth will be revealed. Now, we don't have any indication that Kash Patel himself is the wall that AG Bondi has to get over. So who is it? Who is still the wall? Is it the documents that were, what is it, right? And I guess another one of my questions is, what did they intend with this optic of binders? What did the White House intend for us to think, given that they may be full of previously disclosed information? Let's just flush that out, Clayton. What do you think the best of intentions might have been?
By whom? I'm sorry.
By the White House for printing this out.
I don't know. I mean, can we put up Laura Loomer's comments here? Apparently, Laura Loomer was not among the influencers invited. She's, very pro-Israel, of course. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, according to the other post that we just showed you. But she says, look, I love President Trump, but how embarrassing for the Trump administration that the release of the Epstein files has been fumbled by giving files regarding a landmark pedophile scandal to a group of influencers instead of having an official agency release them. Not a good look. So I don't know. Again, according to our team here at Redacted and sources that we've spoken to, these files are all publicly available. What these binders are, and it says on the binder, phase 1. So is this just like hey, here's a summary of what's already out there and available for you? You can read up and go through them. Phase 2, who knows at this point what's going to come from phase 2. So maybe it's just to say we've got something in the works for you.
And you cannot, are they going to breadcrumb us for how long? Also, if it's a phone book, well, we already have phone logs from court cases in
WikiLeaks
Florida.
already released a lot of this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of those, what are those pink little note cards? We saw those from people who had just simply called him.
Yeah.
President Trump was in that several times, had called Epstein, left messages with his phone number, and it's in a female writing saying, call him back about this. So will his name be in this contact list? Because we've already seen that. We can't surmise very much from it. And also one point that I continue to make is they can't just release a client list unless they're going to actually indict these people, because we have the presumption of innocence and a right to a fair trial. So if you say, okay, it's Shmom Manx, right? That person then should be indicted and get to fight his innocence.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Well, we're going to follow this throughout the show today. And I spoke to Owen Schroyer. He's going to be joining us in just a little bit later in the show to get his take on this. He's been on this story for a long, long time as well. So is this a limited hangout? Let us know in the comments.
This is Dabu7. We have an update to the Jeffrey Epstein document dump. Apparently, they're calling this phase 1. And we're also being told that the FBI has withheld thousands of pages from these documents. Pam Bondi demanding that they be delivered to her in D.C. by Friday.
Appreciate
and
that.
In this whole mix, she's saying that there is information, there is a list of names of individuals, but Many are saying that this first batch that was given to certain journalists and things like that, there's nothing new in it. There's no bombshell information. Bondi said she had everything on her desk. Well, that apparently is not the case. The other night, we heard word that agents were trying to get rid of files secretly. So within the next 48 hours, it's going to be critical to see what really is going down with the Epstein files here. But this is not a client list. They kept it. The client list is not released. People are not happy, and it's like they threw the people a bone. This is very reminiscent of what they did with the JFK files the last time. Said that they were going to release them and then only released a portion and never did release the rest. And that's why we're going through this whole thing again. Here we are with Epstein, and files are missing and being held. I mean, good figure, right? Do you think that they're even going to ever come out and name someone like Bill, who was a sitting president, when Trump refuses to even arrest Hillary? She was sitting front and center when he was inaugurated. You know, that was a sham. And I keep raising the question, who's going to go to jail for all this money that's been stolen? All these billions. Every day, Doge is telling us that all this money was spent here and there and all over. Who is going to go to jail for it? Not a single name mentioned. It's black magic at its finest. Here on this world stage. Join me for the live streams Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have major breaking news. Phase 1 of the Epstein files have been released to a handful of prominent personalities. Many have already been discussing the issue. In this image, we can see Haya Rychik, lives on TikTok, DC Drano, Liz Wheeler, Mike Cernovich, and there are others. Jack Posobiec, I believe, has been talking about this. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say it. I believe the FBI has gone rogue. We have been provided a letter from an unnamed source, and it appears that elements of the federal government are intentionally hiding the Epstein documents to prevent them from being released. This is a degree of shocking I cannot begin to describe. I'm not going to bury the lead or wait. I've got it right here. This letter, again, provided to me from an unnamed source. Office of the Attorney General, Washington, D.C., 20530, February 27th, 2025. Let me read you this shocking letter that reads, Dear Director Patel, before you came into office, I requested the full and complete files related to Jeffrey Epstein. In response to this request, I received approximately 200 pages of documents, which consisted primarily of flight logs, Epstein's list of contacts, and a list of victims' names and phone numbers. I repeatedly questioned whether this was the full set of documents responsive to my request, and was repeatedly assured by the FBI that we had received the full set of documents. Late yesterday, I learned from a source that the FBI field office in New York was in possession of thousands of pages of documents related to the investigation and indictment of Epstein. Despite my repeated requests, the FBI never disclosed the existence of these files. When you and I spoke yesterday, you were just as surprised as I was to learn this new information. By 8 a.m. tomorrow, February 28th, the FBI will deliver the full and complete Epstein files to my office, including all records, documents, audio and video recordings, and materials related to Jeffrey Epstein and his clients, regardless of how such information was obtained. There will be no withholdings or limitations to my or your access. The Department of Justice will ensure that any public disclosure of these files will be done in a manner to protect the privacy of victims and in accordance with the law, as I have done my entire career as a prosecutor. I am also directing you to conduct an immediate investigation into why my order to the FBI was not followed. You will deliver to me a comprehensive report of your findings and proposed personnel action within 14 days. I appreciate your immediate attention to this important matter. I know that we are both committed to transparency for the American people, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to serve our president and our country. Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, I cannot say it any more clearly. I see this, and my immediate reaction is there are rogue criminal elements in the FBI acting outside the structure of our government. That is it. We have elected a president. He has appointed, he has gotten them confirmed, his cabinet members. They have given lawful orders to our law enforcement federal apparatus, and they have denied the Attorney General of these United States access to information pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein and his criminal enterprise. The question is why? This letter says to me so much that it doesn't need to happen. It says, "Dear Director Patel, I want to stress this. I repeatedly questioned whether this was the full set of documents responsive to my request and was repeatedly assured by the FBI that we had received the full set of documents." She says they learned later that the field office in New York was in possession of thousands of pages and they never disclosed them. And she is saying, I want an investigation as to why they did not. This is the FBI field office in New York. This is, I believe, let me pull this up. I want to make sure I'm getting the location right. FBI field office, New York. I believe that's in Manhattan. They have numerous field offices in New York. This is, let's see, the FBI building. I'm pretty sure it's New York. This is the Southern District of New York. I don't know how much this overlaps, but these are the same. This is New York. This is where Donald Trump was falsely convicted, falsely accused of what was it, civil fraud by the state. It's the same place that went after James O'Keefe. This is insane. I have no words. Now, in this letter that it appears, I believe it's written by Pam Bondi. I want to make sure I get this all right. It says, "Dear Patel, Office of the Attorney General." Right. So this presumably is Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. And considering it says, "I am directing you," it has to be Cash's boss. By 8 a.m. tomorrow, February 28th, the FBI will deliver the full and complete Epstein files to my office. Now, this is important. The letter is saying before Patel was confirmed, she made the request, they denied it. And now she's saying, Cash, when you get in, you get me these files. I don't know what's going to happen. But we have long discussed that they are not simply going to, look at this photo. They are not simply going to roll over. Ladies and look at that suit. DC Drano wearing that fine suit. This is history. The Epstein files being released. I have a declassified. This is going to be huge. So I'm currently talking with several of the individuals. As you know, they've all been on Timcast IRL. DC Drano, Libs of TikTok, Liz Wheeler, Mike Cernovich. Shout out. You guys are doing amazing work. I love the hat in the background, by the way. Trump was right about everything. Jack Posobiec. This is incredible stuff. So we're talking with the individuals who are here. We want to get them on the show. It would be an honor and a privilege. We would be only so lucky if they would join us and help us be a part of history and bring this news to you. I am fairly confident we're moving in this direction. My friends, the implications of this letter that has been released is terrifying and shocking. And I don't know how they're going to deny this. How is the corporate press or the neoliberal establishment going to justify that the FBI is actively subverting the orders, the lawful orders of the Attorney General of these United States? There's a viral clip going around of Scott Jennings on CNN. You got to see it. The panelists are saying that Trump is going to take control of the military. What? They're saying he's going to put people in control who then defy the Constitution. And Scott Jennings says, what do you mean? Trump is the president. He is in control of the military. He's the commander in chief. Why are you saying he'd put someone else in charge? Who's he going to put in charge? The way these people are behaving, they view the duly elected government right now as an outside force undermining their will. This is a Senate-confirmed attorney general instructing the FBI who has gone rogue. Now, I can't speak for the entirety of the FBI. There's a bunch of different offices. But the New York field office hiding thousands of documents is shocking. Now, what are they going to say? They're going to say, oh, they never got the order. It's a misunderstanding. Absolute BS, and we all know it. Over this past week, people have been demanding the release of these files. And we had a breaking story just the other day. This is going to be huge news. This is crazy. This is crazy. We had a breaking story. Michael Schellenberger said a whistleblower was telling them that federal employees were destroying evidence related to Epstein in real time. And they were saying, get the information out now. People were tweeting at Pam Bondi being like, Pam, what's taking so long? As we can now see, it appears at least Pam Bondi has been trying, but has been obstructed by rogue elements at the FBI in New York. Could this be where they were destroying evidence? I think it is going to be shocking when we see who is on these client lists, who is in these videos. Now, a lot of people don't let this say, oh, Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump will be putting in Pam Bondi. And I got to be honest, if Trump were actually in it, you think the FBI field office would try and hide that information? No, I think Trump's been largely honest about his interactions with the man, that everybody partied with him. And then when he figured out what was going on, not entirely, but when he saw him hitting on some young woman, he said, get out of my party, dude, you creepo. And said no. RFK Jr. and Trump have both flown on Epstein's private jet. But that doesn't mean that just because they flew on his jet that they were involved. They were with their families. It does mean I ain't giving anybody a free ride. If you flew on his jet, I got questions for you. And maybe it's simple as, oh, my plane wasn't working, I got a free ride. Maybe. I think they should all be investigated. They put out this client list. These people, these liberals are like, oh, yeah, Trump might be. I don't care who's on it. It should not be withheld for any reason. I don't care if Santa Claus himself is on that list. You publish that information. You get it to the American people. The implications of this letter and this story is earth-shattering. It is massive. Yo, I know we all largely suspected and knew this, but this is a criminal conspiracy to obstruct the functioning of this government. This is sedition as far as I can, as beyond anything I could imagine. I'm freaking out. I just got an unnamed source has disclosed this letter to me. I'm freaking out.
So the big list dropped today. Phase 1. Phase 1. I want to start labeling my videos like that. Disturbing video, phase 2. This disturbing video exposes something massive, phase 3. Can't forget, this disturbing video made me lose sleep, phase 2. This all looks like one big game. I mean, we have these social media commentators coming out on a photo op, big smiles with a white binder that says files phase 1. I mean, why do we even need phases? Why do we need phases? I get it. They want to protect victim information, but any and all victim information should have just been blacked out a long time ago. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am speaking ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and see what's actually in the files. Maybe they will go ahead and finally give transparency and expose what needed to be exposed. This would make me so angry if I didn't already know that this is all smoke and mirrors, that we live in one big clown world. I mean, let's be honest. We are hoping for something big here, but at the end of the day, does anybody really believe that Jeff is deceased? No, he's on some island somewhere, perhaps the same island or a new island. And, we're all hyped about these files. Oh, we're finally going to get some transparency. We're finally going to get the information that we wanted. And all we get is a phase 1 binder with information that we already know. Let me take that back. Some of us, not all of us, but some of us were hyped about this because some of us believe everything that we're told. And if you were in that group that you believed all of this and you believe everything that you're told, I would be very upset. I would be very angry. Some of these social media commentators are really hyping this up on their social media pages, showing videos of them holding the binder, smiling, saying, I got it, and people are commenting, well, show us what's inside. No, I really have to hype this up for a moment. The reason why they are hyping this up and building this up and getting all these views is because if they show us what's actually inside, things we already know, we would get bored. We would stop watching. They're giving out names of people that we already know had a connection to Jeffrey when all that information was previously released. But they said it in a way that they were just business deals. They don't know the extent of the relationship between these people and Jeffrey. News articles are coming out, and trust me, big media already had their hands all over this, but news articles are coming out, and I'm reading this from the Associated Press. The Justice Department later acknowledged the files expected to be released Thursday have largely already been circulating in the public domain and are unlikely to include any new bombshells about Jeffrey's case. Where are the flight logs? I get it. Some people are going to say that, well, flight logs were released back in 2020 with all these names. No, I want to hear it officially from them saying these are the flight logs. These are the people on the plane. Are there any videotapes? Because we do know that Jeff was recording people. He took a lot of photos, and we do know there are videotapes out there. Are there any videotapes of people on the actual island? They don't have to show us anything explicit, but at least show us the people that were walking around, maybe. See, you don't know what you're talking about, Minutes of Horror. You don't know what you're saying. You got to wait for phase 3 for that information. Phase 3 is when they're going to give us the good stuff. Well, what happened to phase 2? Phase 2 hasn't been released yet. Well, phase 2 is just an extension of phase 1. I promise phase 3 is going to be the phase. The Justice Department said it was making the documents public to show its commitment to transparency. Oh, isn't that nice? Aren't they just sweeties? But the rollout of the files, which were given to political commentators in binders that read the files phase 1 at the White House Thursday afternoon, showed the administration's preference for conservative influencers with large social media followings. Now that I really don't care one bit, because big media, I don't trust big media one bit. So whether it goes to social media influencers or these big media agencies, it doesn't matter. So that doesn't really make a difference to me. But I just didn't like how these social media influencers handle the situation. Like I said, going on camera, all smiles, like, hey, look what I got. And then they're on their social media platforms showing it off and hyping it up like it's some kind of NFL pregame. No, just show us what's in the damn folders. Hyping it up like it's a big drum roll for 30 minutes, telling us what they had for lunch and what they did today while they're holding the folder, only to reveal there was really nothing in there that we didn't already know. My gosh, man. My gosh, my fiddlesticks. I don't even feel like doing a video on Minutes of Horror. I really think I'd rather want to take a break, because we really do live in a clown world. I have a secondary channel, Seconds of Horror, and I made a video how an Elmo balloon was walking up the stairs. An Elmo balloon was walking up the stairs, and the people that own this Elmo balloon think it's haunted. And I find that vastly more interesting than the information we had gotten today. You are so wrong. You are so wrong. You don't understand. It's phase 1. Well, phase 1 happened years ago when they were dangling this over our heads. And they are still dangling this over our heads. Like I said, if I believed any of this for a minute, I would be upset. The article goes on to say that by Thursday evening, the files had not been provided to the Justice Department reporters or posted publicly online. The documents are unlikely to satisfy online sleuths eager for fresh details. And again, even though big media is acting coy like they didn't get this information, all these news agencies are basically saying the same thing, that there's really nothing in there. Don't get hyped about it, and so forth. And we do know who big media is owned and operated by. So they are just trying to downplay our hype because, like I said, all these news agencies suspiciously sound the same. But anyway, continue to finish this article. It says the documents are unlikely. Again, the documents are unlikely to satisfy online sleuths eager for fresh details about Jeff and connections to famous people that have long been the subject of intense media scrutiny. The lack of new information drew criticism even from some conservatives. Get us the information we asked for, Rep. Anna Paulina Luna from Florida wrote on social media, calling the rollout a complete disappointment. And these are the same people that are supposed to release all this UFO and alien information, this big disclosure, and who popped JFK. But when it comes to who popped JFK, they are supposed to go to the actual location and interview people all the way back then. I mean, who are they going to be interviewing, and who way back then really remembers the details? Either they were a very young child when it happened, or they are very, very old right now. Oh my word. Oh my word. Anyway, Bondi suggested in a Thursday letter to FBI Director Kash Patel that more records were recently discovered. She ordered the FBI to hand over the full and complete files to her by Friday morning and directed Patel to conduct an immediate investigation into why her order to the FBI to turn over all documents were not followed, even though Pam Bondi said this on Fox News.
A lot of people are wondering, because you said last week that you had files on your desk, is when can we see them and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. So we have well over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal information of victims. Other than that, I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some.
So there you have it. She said we're going to see flight logs, a lot of information, but apparently now she's going after Kash Patel for this information. Didn't she review any of this information before it went public to know what was missing and what's not missing? Again, it's just one big circus. This is not left-right thing. I don't care if you're liberal. I don't care if you are a Republican. I could care less. I made the same exact video when Biden was president, when they released that certain information. And I think that video is still up, where I said nobody's going to get in trouble for this. Absolutely nobody's going to be in handcuffs for this. And they weren't, because they said, we don't know how these people were involved. Well, don't you have any information that shows how they were involved? Why is nobody else in handcuffs? Why is nobody else being questioned? Oh, because again, it's all a game. Wait for phase 2. Over the years, thousands of pages of records have been released through lawsuits, Jeff's criminal dockets, public disclosures, and Freedom of Information Act request. In January 2024, a court unveiled a trove of documents that had been collected as evidence in a lawsuit filed by Virginia Giuffre. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Much of the material, including transcripts of victim interviews and old police reports, had already been publicly known. Yes, they have. They included mentions of Trump, former President Bill Clinton, Britain's Prince Andrew, and magician David Copperfield, as well as a testimony from one victim who said she met Michael Jackson at Jeff's Florida home, but nothing untoward happened with him. Like I said, if you are somebody that's really a diehard believer in this, that Jeff actually passed away in prison and you really want justice, again, you should be somebody that's really, really angry right now. But me, I'm still thinking about that Elmo video. That Elmo balloon really did walk up those steps. I don't care what anybody says. But in any case, thank you so much for
Last night on Jesse Waters Primetime, Attorney General Pam Bondi said this.
What you're going to see, hopefully tomorrow, is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information. But it's pretty sick what that man did.
So we were looking today to find out more about why the government's been so suspiciously protective of Jeffrey Epstein. This afternoon, a bunch of conservative influencers left a meeting at the White House with binders that said the Epstein files, phase 1. Once the binders were opened, people were able to see flight records and Epstein's Rolodex and a list of masseuses. The masseuses' names were blacked out, and the information from the flight logs wasn't new. Neither was the Rolodex. When we began to feel duped, Pam Bondi released a letter that says, basically, I was duped too. In the letter addressed to FBI Director Kash Patel, Bondi basically says, I asked you for the full and complete files related to Jeffrey Epstein. I received 200 pages of documents. I asked if these were all the documents, and the FBI said yes. Late yesterday, I learned from a source at the FBI field office in New York was in possession of thousands of pages of documents related to the investigation and the indictment of Epstein. Despite my repeated requests, the FBI never disclosed the evidence of these files. Bondi's demanding by 8 a.m. tomorrow morning that the FBI deliver everything to her office, including all records, audio, video recordings, all materials related to Epstein. And she ensures DOJ will disclose everything. And she's directing Patel to begin an immediate investigation into why the FBI isn't following orders. So who's in charge at the New York FBI field office? Who's withholding Epstein docs from the Attorney General? James Dennehy is running the show there. There he is. This is the guy who emailed his whole staff to dig in after Trump took office. And don't forget that James Comey's daughter is an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. She worked on the Epstein and Maxwell cases. She's kind of knee-deep in this. Epstein was facing sex trafficking charges in Lower Manhattan. Where's all that paperwork? The FBI seized computers, surveillance videos, banking records, file cabinets, and photographs from all of Epstein's properties in New Mexico, the Virgin Islands, Palm Beach, and in New York. The Justice Department also gave Epstein a sweetheart non-prosecution deal 17 years ago. Where are those files? The Bureau of Prisons. Where are those files? You remember where Epstein killed himself? I asked Bill Barr about that, why everything seemed to go wrong that night.
When I first heard all the information and all the coincidences here, I was suspicious.
What were the coincidences? I mean, those were a lot of coincidences.
Well, one of the cameras was out.
Right.
He was supposed to have a cellmate. The cellmate left. They didn't replace the cellmate. And the guards who were supposed to check him every half hour didn't check him.
My EMT source said he was on the scene immediately to pull Epstein's body out to the morgue. And when he got to the cell, he saw 7 people there touching Epstein's body and moving stuff around. Trump did say during the campaign he'd release these files, so it's not like this came out of the blue. Jeffrey Epstein did act as an informant to the FBI. Is the Bureau embarrassed? Is the Bureau embarrassed that they let hundreds of young victims down? This was all happening right under everyone's noses. Epstein was probably an intelligence asset, rumored to be working with the Israelis, maybe this country, probably other countries. Was he a double agent? He had dirt on everyone and a knack for making cash. And he's dead. So the government has no one to protect but themselves.
Let's talk about the Pentagon. I've been waiting. I mean, if there's one thing I've been passionate about for decades is the amount of waste and abuse that's inside the Pentagon. The military-industrial complex needs to be slashed massively. And
$300 for a screw. That's what the American taxpayers are paying for right now. So it's not just about, do we have a strong military, but do we have a wasteful one? Go ahead.
I would pay a lot less for a screw.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that right now. Is
I see what you did with that.
Is President Trump really about to slash the size and scope of the Pentagon? Are we really about to end foreign wars? During yesterday's cabinet meeting, President Trump leaned over to Defense Secretary Hegseth to push him to make cuts. So will it happen? Pentagon is set to fire up to 5,400 workers. And of course, the mainstream media like Reuters, which makes money, of course, from USAID, says there's a backlash. Yeah, it's from the military industrial complex, of course. Lieutenant Karen Kiwa, I'm going to get this right. Karen Kiwakowski. Yes, did I name it? I think I got it right. Is a national security expert, a retired U.S. Air Force officer who was openly critical of the U.S. disaster in Iraq. She's a critic of these wars that the U.S. carries out around the world. And is it safe to say, Karen, that you're a progressive? So you also come from that perspective, which we've seen, I think, liberals move in the direction of being sort of warmongers over the past few decades. They've become the party of war. They used to be the party of peace. Is it safe to say that you're maybe a lone voice right now?
I'm really more of a libertarian, and I think we are hearing more libertarian voices and at least libertarian messages when it comes to examining the waste, the fraud, the excess, the unnecessary expenditures that we have for the Pentagon and the empire that has been created. So I'm anti-empire. Does that make me a progressive?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I guess it used to. Yeah, I know.
We don't know.
All the weird melding of these parties because, yeah, I mean, liberals back in the day were very much anti-war. They were anti-empire. Yes. They were anti, carrying out regime change operations around the world. And I'm more of a libertarian as well, and I agree in the same way. So it's weird. The liberals have gone so far afield from those tenets. It's kind of strange. So why do you think we're hearing such a big backlash right now? There's a backlash where the liberal media is saying they're so concerned about 5,400 employees about to be fired, and this is really, really terrible.
Yeah, well, obviously anything that they can do to hit back at Donald Trump to make him look like he's making a bad decision. This is part of it, the letting go of employees, civil servants, that kind of thing. But much more of that is coming. It has to happen. And really, it's been pointed out that presidents like Bill Clinton, Obama, other presidents have cut military, have ended programs and put people on the street, so to speak. In fact, I served in the military for 20 years, and I remember at least two reduction in forces that happened in the 80s and 90s. So, this is normal. Cutting military is normal. But what I think Trump is talking about doing, if he does it, is really far more drastic than just, small cuts. He's not nipping around the edges. He's looking at a really massive reduction and transformation of our idea of what the defense needs to be for this country. And I do think, and I don't know if Trump will do this, but I do think it's a great opportunity for those who oppose empire to really bring the troops home, to close unnecessary and warmongering bases and military positions abroad. I mean, that we have, I think, 155 countries have some sort of American military presence. That's not needed. Okay, that is bad in itself. And then, the whole population in this country, I would say most of them, really don't like fraud. They don't like waste, and they don't like $300 screws. That doesn't make sense to them. And so really it's a popular, fixing what's wrong with the military in a lot of ways can be popular. Now, when you start nipping into the big Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics and the congressional lobbying activities, when you start cutting their pet projects and the things that enrich them, kickbacks that they get for their campaigns, just all the dirty stuff that goes on, that defense money funds. When we start nipping into that and cutting that, Congress will be the barrier, not the people. People, I think, agree with this. And the people in the military. Now, I've been retired since 2003, but people in the military today, they care about the same things. They don't like fraud, waste, and abuse. They don't like stupidity, and they don't like working in the middle of stupidity. And there's lots and lots of examples we have to deal with. And now's the opportunity to do it.
But when we look at the military, even those who really are supportive of the military, we know that this ballooning budget has not contributed to quality of life for military members. When we started Redacted, we were freaking out that the military budget was in the $700 billion range. Then the next year was $800 billion. This year it's $910 billion, which is 3 times that of China's, which has more military personnel. And so is there a way that we can, in fact, shrink the military budget and do better by military personnel?
Oh yeah, there's tons of ways. First off, reduce the footprint globally where it doesn't make any sense, and that's most places. It doesn't make sense. We also have, and this we don't talk about very much, but we have literally probably 1,000 different legacy systems. And when I say legacy systems, I don't mean just computer systems, weapons systems that have been around, some of them in World War II era, that still have logistics tails, that still have a production line that can be either turned on or actually is running. These create a small number of jobs around the country, but they are not necessary. Nobody's going to notice when we get rid of them, and they should have been gotten rid of a long time ago. We also have we have a lot too many generals, and you can say, well, what's wrong with that? The generals don't cost us very much, but they do, because generals require commands, they require staffs, they require growing missions, they compete with each other for the validation of their missions, the justification. They become political activists for more spending in their pet part of the Pentagon. So we really have to restructure our organization so that there's the right number of people at the top, and all those resources that are now, providing office space and useless activities that make generals feel like they are doing something. That money can be pushed down into taking care of people. And I know that you've probably done stories on this and certainly seen them, of the condition of American barracks for our enlisted people that, are not living off base. They're living on base in really conditions that they're just absolutely unhealthy, appalling. And it's an embarrassment that we spend more than any other nation, more than the 12 nations underneath us we spend for military stuff. And we have moldy, flooding, contaminated, crowded, falling apart barracks for our people.
It's
That
really
tells you it's a big problem.
Isn't that always the case, though, Lieutenant Colonel? Because, you have where the massive amounts of money go to the military industrial complex, and the contractors, they're making the millions. They're building the luxury houses around D.C., but it's the rank and file soldiers. It's the fighting force that gets stepped on and gets treated so poorly all the time. They can't. I remember, in Iraq, we couldn't put proper armor on the Humvees.
Oh, yeah.
When IEDs were just blasting through it like aluminum foil. And it finally took years of them to put proper armor on the Humvees, for crying out loud.
Yep. Yeah, well, one of the things Trump talks about, and I know Pete Hegseth talks about this, and we'll see if he follows through, but he talks about putting the war fighter and the people on the line who support that war fighter. He's talking about putting them first, taking care of them. Their conditions, and putting money that we have for personnel to those people. So we'll see. I think it is a priority that he has, and it's an important priority. But really, this whole 50% cut, because Trump has offered this up, can we cut our military 50%? Well, we certainly can. And the first step is to really have a set of priorities about what are we doing with our military. And I've always said for years, and I noticed this even when I was in the military, that because I was in the Pentagon on 9/11, right? Very unprotected that day for some reason. And I realized all of this spending does not defend our country, and it doesn't defend our troops. It doesn't defend anything. It certainly doesn't defend our borders. We know that. But we spend all this money, and almost all of it is offensive. It is to foment problems abroad, maybe create problems that we can then use the military to solve. I'm not sure the logic behind all of it, but we spend a lot of money. It's not on defense. Why don't we just talk about what it takes to defend our country, to defend the people in this country? And that's the starting point. We can probably do it at 25% of what we're currently spending.
I mean, look at these other
China
countries
does.
like China,
Yeah.
Russia. I mean, look at it as a percentage of GDP, how much they're spending to defend themselves. And we have 900 military bases around the world, hundreds of thousands of forces scattered around the world. I spoke to Dr. Ron Paul this morning. He said something to me. He said back when he couldn't even believe back when he was in Congress, he said he found out that the Coast Guard, they were begging for all sorts of more money and more money and more money. And he found out that the Coast Guard was like operating clipper ships in the Mediterranean. And he said, well, I'm sorry, I thought the Coast Guard was meant to guard our coast. Our coast.
Yeah.
What the hell are they doing in the Mediterranean? Like, this is
And
the kind of
Black Sea.
boondoggle.
The Coast Guard is
Yeah,
also in the
exactly.
Black Sea. I mean, that is insane. So that's an easy fix. Pull them back, pull them to port, count your boats,
Save some money.
what you need to do, and address it. Whether you have to cut or change your mission a little bit, you do that. That's what Americans are supposed to do. That's what our leadership is paid to do.
And defend our southern border. I mean, I know I'm maybe preaching to the choir here, but if we have over 100 years of history in the United States where our soldiers defended our southern border in the United States. And this is not like some new idea. Instead of having forces in Stuttgart, Germany, for crying out loud, could actually be in Arizona. A lot of people in our chat room, I mean, love you. And they're saying, yes, bring our troops home. I mean, I think our audience, we should put up a poll here, but our audience, I think, really agrees. And I think, Trump has been asked repeatedly over the past few weeks, are you going to bring troops out of Europe? What do you think it would take for him to do that?
Well, he's on the right track because he is, he's pushing Europe away, treating him like a vassal. They don't like being treated like a vassal, so they're pushing him away. They're saying, how can we be independent of America? That's great. That's good progress. But yeah, if they're independent of us, if Russia and the United States and China are treating each other as peers, not necessarily aggressively, not fearfully, there's no need to have American troops in Europe. They can defend themselves perfectly well. There's just so many opportunities to do. We can even defend Europe. We can do it from here with the technology that we have. We do not need American troops there. And we haven't really for a long time. And actually, that would be quite popular in places like Germany. Now, there's other European countries. We're building these massive bases in Romania and Poland, and they're already built to some extent, but they're not finished, I don't think. I know the Romanian one is not finished. And why are we doing that? Well, we're doing that because we're leaving Germany and we're getting out of some of these other places where they're unhappy with us. But why? Those should be canned as well. But it's a lot to ask, but it is not unreasonable for us to
No, it's not.
bring the troops home and reduce our spending in this area.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? And I'll get you out of here on this, unless Natalie has another question here. But you mentioned briefly, and I cannot let this go by, especially when I see the JFK book above your head there. And you mentioned being in the Pentagon on 9/11 on that day, and you said we were not very protected on that day, oddly enough. Can you elaborate being in the Pentagon that day and why you felt like there was not a level of protection?
I mean, the day 9/11, started out so for most people, a beautiful day on the East Coast, just like any other day. And then suddenly we have buildings falling down in New York. We have airplanes being hijacked. We have this, whatever it was in the Pentagon, whatever it was that hit the Pentagon or blew up the Pentagon. And we were in that building, and it's 25,000 military people and civilians working for the Defense Department are in the Pentagon. And we were sitting ducks. We were absolutely sitting ducks. There was, we can talk, that's a whole nother thing on why that was, but certainly spending the amount of money that we spend, 9/11 should have been a wake-up call for a lot more than it was. What 9/11 served as was a reason to fight more wars. That's how the politicians used it. That's what we did as a result of it. But what we should have done was said, this Pentagon defends nothing. It does not defend America. It doesn't defend our borders, doesn't defend our airspace. Not only that, the intelligence aspect of this Pentagon doesn't work because we were surprised. So, that was unless
it was all part of a bigger plan to allow it to be attacked.
Well, certainly.
Yes.
But we won't really be able to get to all that until we dig through the Pentagon and really shake it up and really shrink it down and really find out what's wrong with it, because there are things wrong with it. And we need to get to the bottom of this, shrink it down. And I think if we really seriously do this, we're going to find out, we're going to get some answers about some things that have happened in the last, let's say, 70 years.
Yeah. And so I guess one question I have is, do you think that the language out of this Pentagon and this White House is indicative of a seriousness to do that?
I do think that they're serious, but I am worried that the people sending this message, Elon Musk, Hegseth, and Trump, are vulnerable.
Okay.
You know, if this doesn't happen in 18 months, 24 months, if we do not dig in, break it up, really reduce drastically, and not just the Pentagon, but we're talking about the Pentagon, it certainly needs it. If we don't do it fast, if we don't do it in a really committed and intense way, we will miss an opportunity that will not come again, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you're right. They are vulnerable. And there's deep state people, the permanent Washington, the permanent military industrial complex really doesn't want this to happen. So they're going to fight for their money and they're fighting for their lives right now. So that's great having you on the show.
Coffee. Follow me.